You're really going to enjoy this message. Here we're going to talk about how much is enough. Not for me, for you. How much money do you really want? We're going to be introduced to a very special friend of mine, a great speaker and quite a result-oriented guy, Paul Hutsey from Pittsburgh, Kansas. And we're going to be talking about the image maker. You are an image maker.
Now, on page 17, at the top of the page, how much is enough? Earl Nightingale said something that I love. He said, most people think they want more money than they really do, and they settle for a lot less than they could get. I think probably many of you were born with the very same idea I was, or raised with it anyway, that if you're going to earn any money, you're going to have to work really hard. Well, let me go back to what Napoleon Hill said here. He said, one idea is all that you need to achieve the success you seek. Now, he said, when riches begin to come, they're going to come so quickly and in such great abundance that one wonders where they've been hiding through all those lean years. Now, he said, this is an astounding statement, and all the more so when you take into consideration the popular belief that riches come only to those who work hard and long. When you begin to think and grow rich, you're going to observe that riches begin with a state of mind, with definiteness of purpose, with little or no hard work. He said, you and every person ought to be interested in knowing how to acquire that state of mind which will attract riches. Now, in another part, way towards the middle of the book, he reemphasizes this. He said, if you are one of those people who believe that hard work and honesty alone will bring riches, perish the thought, because it's not true. He said, riches, when they come in huge quantities, are never the result of hard work. Riches come, if they come at all, in response to definite demands based upon the application of definite principles and not by chance or luck. Now, we're talking about the definite principles. It's up to you to apply them. You want to stop and think, how can I fill a definite demand? Now, you don't have to go too far to see very poor service. These people have never gained an understanding of the law of compensation. The law of compensation is based on three very simple points. The amount of money you and I earn is always going to be in direct ratio to the need for what you do, your ability to do it, and the difficulty there will be in replacing us. Now, there very likely is a great need for what you do. You had nothing to do with that. That need was just there. Your ability to fill that need. All you have to do every day is put forth an effort to do whatever you're doing better. And as you do that, you're going to find that it'll become very difficult to replace you. There's very few pros around. A lot of people busy, but not too many doing it properly. Now, we're saying for you to get into this prosperity concept or get it into high gear, you must be specific. If you want some money, you have to be certain that you know exactly how much money you want. You see, what we're working with is our subconscious mind. Now, we've touched on that a few times. Let's take a look at it again. It's the ideas that have been programmed into our subconscious mind through repetition that is forming the conditioning that is there now. It's that conditioning that causes us to do what we do and get the results we get. If there's poverty in this area or a lack of wealth, the problem is not in what we do. The problem is in what causes us to do it. You see, the action or the behavior is an effect. Now, this is what everyone works at changing. They're working at changing effects. If you want to change a result, it's absolutely essential that you go to the cause of the problem, the primary cause. And the cause of your financial situation right now is right in here in the subconscious mind. Now, what we must do is consciously choose, think, and build an idea of the prosperity that we're looking for here in our consciousness. Then we have to get emotionally involved in that idea. Now, people without money would have a difficult time accepting this. I have never met anyone with money that had a difficult time accepting this. As a matter of fact, they know it, and that's why they have the money. Now, you're working with your subconscious mind, and you have to know exactly how much you want. Now, let's stop and think for a few minutes about money. We live in one of the richest countries in the history of the world. There's absolutely no question about that. You can work productively all of your life. Let's say for 40, 45 years. And you know, it's a strange thing, but only 1 or 2 people out of 100 at the end of their commercial career are financially independent. And yet anyone can become financially independent. And the strange thing about it is you never have to earn a lot of money to become financially independent. Very, very few people earn a lot of money. There is 0.453% of the population that are earning $100,000 a year or more. Less than 1/2 of 1% earn $100,000 a year or more. Now that's shocking to the average person's mind. Quite often in seminars we'll ask different individuals, how many people do you think? What percentage of the population? I had a young lady the other day in a seminar down in Ottawa say about 1/3. Less than 1/2 of 1%. If you go back and take a look at the number of people that are earning between $50,000 and $100,000, you're going to find it's a ridiculously low number. There's only 4.5% earning in excess of $50,000 a year. The number that go between 25 and 50 is 53%. So when you're at those cocktail parties or the neighborhood barbecue, don't believe all the stories you're hearing. Because they ain't necessarily so. Now let's think of this. Do we have anybody here that's 20 years old? 21? Andy, let me ask you a question. Do you want to stand up for a moment? Andy, how many ways, let me shake your hand first. How you doing, Andy?
Thanks,
good. I'm doing wonderful. Andy, how many ways do you think there are to earn money?
Hundreds.
Well, you know, it's written in the book that there's only 2. Just 2 ways. Now, that's a little shocking to most people. I had a young man the other day say 1 way. He was really close. There's 2 ways. One is people at work, and the other is money at work. They're the only 2 ways that you have to earn money. Do you work, Andy?
Yes, I do.
You do. Do you spend one of those each week?
Very easily.
Very easily. What we're looking at here is a $20 bill. Andy, when you got up this morning, did you sit on the side of the bed and think, I wonder if I'll get dressed today?
No, I didn't.
Just automatically got dressed, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
That's a habit, all right? That's something we do without giving any conscious thought to it. Andy, let's suppose you took one of these $20 bills and set it aside each week. Just fold it up and set it aside. And you did that for 50 weeks. You have 50 20s. How much money would you have?
$1,000.
$1,000. Now, Andy, if you did that for 50 weeks, you'd have probably formed the habit of doing it. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Habits are hard to break, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And if you kept doing it every year for 40 years, how much would you have?
$40,000.
$40,000. That's right. That's if you just left it sitting there. However, if you found someone that really understood how to find gainful employment for that $20 bill, and you give it to them to put to work for you, then you've got two ways going for you. You're working, Andy, and so is your 20. Do you know at the end of 40 years, you wouldn't have 40,000, Andy. You know how much you'd have?
No, I don't.
What do you think you might have?
So a couple $100,000?
A couple of $100,000. If they only found gainful employment at 10%, you'd have $450,000. Yet all you've ever done is set aside $20 a week. If they found gainful employment for it at 12%, Andy, you wouldn't have $450,000, you'd have $850,000. And if they found gainful employment for this $20 bill at 14%, and there's many people around that can help you do that today, you'd have $1,520,000, Andy. And all you've ever done is set aside $20 a week. And you'd have $1.5 million working for you. Now, there's less than 0.5% of the population of your country that are earning in excess of $100,000 if you never spent the $150,000 or the $1.5 million. If you just left it sitting there, Andy, do you know that it would earn for you between $150,000 and $200,000 a year? And you'd still have your $1.5 million. I would imagine you could probably get by on that for a while, couldn't you?
If I had to.
Thanks, Andy. And all Andy's ever done is set aside $20 a week. Do you know if Andy worked on chips at McDonald's and never got promoted, he could become a millionaire? So do you see, the classical error that most people make is if you want to be a millionaire, you have to earn a lot of money. And of course, that's not true. If you want to be a millionaire, you have to have a plan to be a millionaire. And that's all you need. You just have to make up your mind you're going to become. How many of you would like to be millionaires? Be honest. Let me see a show of hands. Everybody's hands up. How about you? Would you like to be a millionaire? You know you can. All you have to do is set aside one of those each week. Give it to someone who really understands money. Now, I would be the wrong guy to give it to. If you have any doubt about this, you just ask my wife. You see, John was mentioning his goal was to earn more money than his wife could spend. I set that goal quite a while ago, and my wife said she was up to the challenge. Why aren't there more people become millionaires? Do you think it's possibly because they're not in the habit of setting one of those aside? What would you say a habit was? We said a habit was an idea that was fixed here in our subconscious mind with respect to money. Now, if there's such a small number of people make it, they must have a habit in their subconscious mind with respect to money, but I would say it's a bad habit. But you know, through conscious choice, we can form a good habit. We can renew the mind. And you only have to discipline yourself for a very, very short period of time. Now, do you know there's many people that'll tell you they can't save any money because they're in debt? Well, if you want to use that as an excuse, go ahead. But in my books, it's a poor one. You can be in debt and still put money to work for you. As a matter of fact, if there's only two ways of earning money, it would be an excellent idea to get both ways working, especially if you're in debt. Now, take a look at page 18. If you find the task of getting your financial world in good order for this exciting journey is something that you're just not able to do, I would strongly suggest that you seek professional assistance. Now, this is something that all wealthy people do. Now, let's go back and take a look here again. John, in the last lesson, encouraged you to be very honest, take stock where you're at. I'm suggesting you decide exactly where you want to go or the star that you want to hit. Now, all we need to get from here to here is a plan and then follow it. You don't have to know exactly everything you have to do, but you have to go to someone who does. I mentioned earlier that many years ago I earned in excess of $1 million in 1 year. Now I'm going to tell you something that I'm not too proud of, but it's the truth. At the end of the year, I didn't have any money. I was one of those rich people that didn't have any money. I was living fairly well, but nothing extraordinary. I didn't buy any planes or trains, or I didn't shoot off to Paris for a weekend. I wasn't in the habit of flying off to Atlantic City or Las Vegas and play on the tables. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know where it went. There was some things I wanted that I wasn't even able to afford to buy, and they weren't extraordinary things. Now, if you've always worked for let's say an average wage, you might be wondering, well, how did he do it? It wasn't difficult. There's some people here in the audience that have done exactly the same thing. Probably a number of you. And you'll say, no, it wasn't difficult. Do you know that most people have never sat down with someone that really understands money? I think if you needed an operation, you had to have your appendix removed or something, I don't think you'd talk to the guy next door unless the guy next door happened to be a very competent surgeon. I think if you needed a root canal, it'd be highly unlikely you'd talk to your druggist about it. I have mentioned earlier here on the tape that we had a bit of a catastrophe with our plumbing this morning. I didn't phone the electrician to have that repaired. Why is it we just ask anyone for advice? Why is it we just say, what do you think? The person we're asking probably doesn't. But they'll always give you an opinion. Well, we're suggesting you sit down with someone that really understands. Now, wealthy people follow the advice of financial experts. It is similar to the principle, the idea that if a person's body were sick, he or she would seek out a skilled physician for advice. Moreover, you should also keep in mind that even healthy people, if they're wise, periodically go to a doctor for a checkup. You know, I went to a doctor for a checkup here just recently. There was nothing wrong with me. Oh, well, my wife says go, so I went. You know, I do everything she tells me. And he was examining me, and I thought, wonder why he wanted to be a doctor. I thought I'd hate to do this. You see, I'm a salesperson, and I love to sell. I actually pity a person that's not. Now, I know there's a lot of people that love what they do, and they probably pity the salesperson, but that's the way I think. And so, of course, I was comparing what he did with selling. And I thought I'd much rather sell. But I still went for his advice, even though there was nothing wrong with me. Now, I want you to think about this. You don't have to be sick to get better. Come down to the middle of page 18. We say it's already been brought to your attention that very few people ever develop real expertise in the area of serious financial planning. They just don't do it. Therefore, we should seek out a competent financial counselor. Now, if you are not on the road to financial independence, this is probably why. There's three categories that people generally fall into. Number one, they're in a deficit position. That means there's more going out than there is coming in. They're in debt. Number two, they're in a break-even position. Everything that comes in goes back out. Number three, they're in a surplus position. They have more coming in than what is going out. Now, do you know, you could be in any one of those three positions, and it might still be wise to sit down with someone who really understands money. And you know, that takes some studying. As a matter of fact, it takes a lot of studying. It's a full-time job. It's not something you're going to do on a part-time basis. You've got to be as sharp as a tack, and I'm going to suggest that you have to have the left hemisphere of your brain fairly highly developed, because it's quite a technical task. And of course, I operate from the right hemisphere of my brain. Someone once told me I was a bihemispherical paraplegic, and I'm inclined to agree with them. I just operate from about half of my brain. That's the conceptual side. The other side is kind of useless. Now, a person that's in a deficit position could form the opinion, and it would be tragic, that all they have to do is get more money coming in and that would solve their problem. However, if they're in the habit, if they've got a habit, now think of this, of spending more than they earn, would bringing in more solve their problem? No, of course not. If a person was in a break-even position, if they were in the habit of spending everything they earn, would bringing in more money solve their problem? No. Well, maybe the person should change a habit. Maybe the person should change the way they think. Maybe they should change the source of their advice. How many of you would really like to become financially independent? Be honest. Ask yourself, do you really want to change your financial position? Now, I'm going to give you a formula that the masses use, and because they use it, they end up broke. It's a simple formula. There's nothing complicated about it. They take their income, they subtract from their income their expenses, and what is left, they save. What do you think the problem is? I beg your pardon? Nothing left. No. It costs them more to live than what they're earning. Now, here's a formula for financial freedom. I like that better than financial independence, because I'm going to tell you money will generate a respectable amount of freedom. How many of you would like to go to Paris that have never been there? How many would like to go to Rio that has never been there? How many would like to go to Madrid and never been there? All you need is a few bucks. A person should sit down and establish financial goals. They should know exactly what they want to be worth a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Without giving any thought of how they're going to get there, this is where I want to be. Then they should add to that their expenses. Do you know that most people do not even have the brain cells to figure that out properly? I might be able to, but it would probably take me a long time, and I would really be afraid that I would make a big error. This is something that has to be done by a pro. Most people are not able to even identify all the areas they spend money. Well, they may think they do, but they really don't. When they add those two together, that tells them what their income must be. Now, that doesn't change their income, but at least they've got a target to shoot at. Now, if you want to become financially independent, sit down and decide exactly what you want. Go to a real good financial counselor, a financial planner, and let them get involved in what they call a fact-finding mission. They've got forms, they've got that little chip now. I mean, there's so many ways that they can do it. Let them figure out what it costs you to live, and then you're going to know how much you have to earn. Now, here's how we change it. I want you to take the back of that little card that you've got. Take the back of that little buff card. draw a box on it like that. Now, if you're sitting in your den, in your family room, maybe out in the backyard, go and get a pad and a paper. Just turn this off until you get it, and then put that box on it. Now take and draw a line right down the center. Now take and put 4 lines inside the box. Now above the first set of boxes, write an M. Above the last one, put an F. Put a T beside the M and a T beside the F. Put a W in the center. Now we've created a week's calendar. I like to do it a little different. Now, what we're going to do now is take and change it into mornings and afternoons. AM. Let's loosen this up a bit. You repeat this after me as you write it in. Come on. AM, AM. Oh, come on, only about a half. You're doing it. Right? What'd John say? The more you put in, the more you get out. Come on. AM, AM, AM. No, you see, I started ahead of you, so I'm usually a millisecond ahead of the mass. All right. Now, let's take the other boxes and put in PM. Come on. PM, 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 PM. There, we all finish at the same time. You learn quick. All right. Now, let's stop and look at what the average person does. They go out and they work Monday morning, Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and they earn, let's say, $35,000 a year, and they give it all to someone else. Every cent of it. They give it to the mortgage company, they give it to the grocery store company, they give it to the leasing company, they give it to the gas station company, they give it to the dry cleaning company. They give it all away. It was their money. They worked for it, they earned it, and they didn't even keep any of it. Do you know the ancient Babylonians go way, way back? They knew exactly how to become financially independent. They were a very, very, very wealthy race of people. They said that a part of all you earn is yours to keep. And what you should do is take the first part you earn. That's yours. Now, you're going to find people say, but I couldn't afford to do that. Oh, the truth is, you can't afford not to do that. Because you see, the latter years of your life, what should actually be the worst may very well turn, or the best, may very well turn out to be the worst. Andy, $1.5 million, and all you've ever done is set aside $20 a week. Is that correct? Have you any idea, Andy, what you would be worth in a relatively short period of time if you did that? If you just said, I'm going to take what I earn between 8 a.m. and noon on Monday, and I am going to pay me that. Anyone that is prepared to make that kind of a commitment, I can assure you, can become financially independent in a relatively short period of time. Now, for many years, I traveled with John all over the place, all over the country. We would work up 200 cities in a year. And we were working with all kinds of financial institutions. And you know what really puzzled me? These people were working around money all the time, but they didn't understand it. Most of them didn't even have very much of it. It's like Bernard Brooke one time said. He said it puzzled him. People on Wall Street worked around money all their life, and yet they didn't understand it. They thought they were excited because they were earning money. The truth is they were earning the money because they got excited. There's a story of Pat and John in the Born Rich book. Pat and John are friends of mine. Here about 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I guess, just around this time of year, it was around the beginning of November, We got together and we sat down in the Prince Hotel. It was obvious to me that they were not a very happy couple, and they weren't. And it was obvious why. They had never sat down and taken one of these gold cards and written on it what they wanted. They were locked in that particular morning to a very negative polarity. I was locked into a very positive one. I was not about to move. And I said to them, John, what's something you really want? He thought I was being ridiculous, and he says, Pat and I'd like to have our own house. I said, then go and get it. Well, he said, we can't. Well, I said, why not? Well, he said, we haven't got any money. I said, John, you don't need any money. Now, some of you think that's sort of a ridiculous statement. They certainly did. They said, what do you mean we don't need any money? I said, well, you haven't made a decision to buy the house. What do you need the money for? And you know, that's why most people never make a decision to live the way they want to live, because they haven't got the money. Then the truth is they don't need the money until they make the decision to do whatever they're going to do. I said, you want to be in the house before Christmas? I took the calendar, and right across the 18th of December, I said, moving. Now, I said, you just think of how to get that house, not why you can't. I said, I'd be a poor guy to talk to from this point on, because I don't have a real spectacular record in the area of real estate. But I said, I know a lady that does. She worked at Harvey Callis Real Estate just up around the corner from the Prince Hotel in Toronto. Her name is Natalie Kopman, Natalie Wasserman now. I was just at Natalie's wedding last week. I said, Natalie, I got a couple of live ones over here for you. They want to buy a house and they haven't got any money. And I remember her saying, oh, great. But at any rate, she came around and I said, Natalie, John and Pat have an image in here of the kind of house they want. I want you to listen carefully to them until you get the image in your mind of the kind of house they want. Go out and find it and come back and tell them how much they need to put down on that house. And I said, it'll probably turn out to be an awful lot less than what they thought. They thought it cost lots of money. They didn't know how much lots was. The very day that I had marked on their calendar, the 18th of December, they moved in to number 7 Bard's Walkway in Willowdale, Ontario. They lived in that house for a couple of years, and they sold it for a handsome profit. And the lady that bought the house is here today. Stand up for a minute, Vera. Vera Kozel bought that house. Is that correct, Vera?
Yes.
Thank you, Vera. Vera lived in it for some time, and she sold it for a respectable profit. Now, I'm only going back 5, 6 years. The lady that bought it lived in it for a while, and on the 15th of September, my own son and his wife bought it. That's right. Is that right, Leslie? Brian, stand up here a minute. Am I right or wrong? Now, how old are you, Leslie? 23. Brian?
26.
26. I keep forgetting. All right. Reminds me how old I am. Here he is, 26 years old. Where did I say I was when I was 26? I didn't even know the war was over. I didn't. But I never had very good information running around my head. You see, that's not the first house they've bought. That's the second house they've bought. They've got the first one rented, and now they're living in the second one. And yet they're only 26 and 23. You telling me you can't make it? Here's a kid here from Burlington, Canada. The Barrie Banner Advance. Little town just north of Toronto. City, not a little town at all. Overcome procrastination, earn $1 million. Earning $1 million before the age of 30 is passé. Tim Krochuk told Barrie North Collegiate students how to earn it before they're 20. All you need is a winning attitude and the ability to overcome procrastination and intimidation. A 19-year-old student from Burlington, Ontario. It's a combination which has earned him a net worth of $1.5 million. An audible gasp escaped from the audience of more than 75 students at North when Krochuk revealed what he was worth. He said, there's no trick to having a winning attitude. It's all in the way you think. He said, this stuff, although it sounds really hokey, it works. This kid had his first business when he was 12 years old in grade 7. He's had 8 since, 4 of which is still in operation. You think you can't? That kid started when he was 12. Brian and Leslie just bought their second house, 26 and 23. I was trying to figure out where to get the rent. And I'm going to tell you, on more than one occasion, I never got it, so they put a lock on the door. I'm not going to ask you how many of you that's happened to, but it's happened to me, and it happened more than once. Didn't even know how to do that. I met someone that really understands money, and I married her. And when we came back to Toronto, I said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to originate an idea, and we're going to start a company so that the people that go through the seminars will be able to have a choice of going and getting competent financial advice. And you know that thousands of people have gone through that company. Now, Linda operated that company. The first couple that went through there were getting married in 9 months. I'm going back about 8 years. One said they couldn't save money, and the other one said they couldn't save their soul. Nino, you know this couple. With a proper plan, they had enough money to put a down payment on a house and buy all the appliances for that house 9 months later when they got married. Here just recently, they sold that house, earned a handsome profit. In fact, they earned more money, profit on that house, than they have earned themselves working since they started to work, and they moved into a much more beautiful house. Now, if you're not making the headway you want, for goodness sake, go get some advice. Now, you go back on page 19. And as you take a look in this book, again, if you're sitting in your family room or you're sitting out in the back porch, on page 19, write in a date that you're going to have an appointment with a competent financial planner. And go and sit down and let them help you answer the second question. The figure below is the amount of money I need to provide the things I want to live the way I choose to live.
Don't let your present financial situation deter you from going right after the thing that you really want, your goal. I want to introduce you now to a couple that I've just referred to in the seminar who thought they couldn't go after what they wanted because it would cost lots of money. But with the proper advice, they got exactly what they were after. They're a couple of very dear friends of mine, Pat and John Swan.
We met Bob early that day. I remember it very distinctly. It was at the Prince Hotel in Toronto. We were to meet him at 7 o'clock in the morning. And the whole purpose of the meeting was to find out what we really wanted. We didn't know at that point, but we knew we wanted something. And I remember meeting him, and he looked directly at John and said, "What is it you sincerely want? What do you want more than anything?" And John just looked at him and
I sat there and I thought, we'd been discussing this for a couple of hours. I sat there and I thought for a couple of minutes and I said, "Bob, I really want Pat and I and Tony to have our own house for Christmas, 1982. And this was early November. And that's what I wanted, and it scared me. We hadn't done real well financially up until that point. We were living in a basement apartment, and the idea of owning our own home before Christmas was what I really wanted. But I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what I needed to do it. I didn't know where I was going to get the money. I had never bought a house before. I didn't know even who I had to contact as far as a lawyer or a real estate person or anybody that I needed to help me get this house.
not only that, John, we didn't even know how much money we needed. We didn't have a clue. We just thought it was astronomical, and we sort of discounted it, put it out of our minds.
And that's when Bob sat there and looked at us and he said, well, what you have to do is put together a plan. And with that, he reached down and he moved his coffee cup off the placemat, and he picked up this placemat. I still have it. I'm not a collector, but I still have it because it...
You got to look at this. It's great. It says the Prince Hotel down there. And
Bob turned it over, and he wrote us out a recipe of what we needed to do to get this house. And he wrote a statement on top of the placemat, and it says, decide on the amount you want to live the way you want to live, and go for it. And with that, we started into some action. Bob suggested a real estate agent that we contact and get this real estate agent to show us some houses, find out what the prices were, find out what kind of house we wanted. We had to get a picture, a clear picture of what we wanted. We had to get emotionally involved in that picture. It was something that was, it was such a big idea for us at that time. It scared us. It really made us uncomfortable. And with that, Bob laughed. You know, he really did. He said, it should make you feel uncomfortable. If it's a big enough goal, it will make you feel uncomfortable. And he grabbed my day timer that I had sitting on the table, and he opened it up until December 20th. And you can see the day timer. He put a line through the date, December 20th, 1982, and he wrote, moving into house. And that made me feel uncomfortable. After that, we closed the day timer, and he said, well, I have a real estate agent that you can call. I know of a girl that's attending the seminar that's a very good agent. So he told me to call her. And I said, okay, Bob, when we get home, I will give her a call. He said, no, call her now.
there's a quarter, go.
So I went to the phone, and I called her and made an appointment with the real estate agent. And later that afternoon, we went and looked at some homes. Within a couple of days, we found exactly the home we wanted. And then the pressure really came on, because we signed an offer on this house. The offer was accepted, and we still did not have the money to close the house deal. It was interesting. It was a lot of emotion. It was a fair amount of pressure because it was uncomfortable. And when you're doing something different than you've normally done in your past, it becomes uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to you. But to make the story come to a beautiful ending, early November, we chose the date, December 20th, to move in the house. And at 7 o'clock, December 20th, the lawyer brought the keys to us, and we unpacked our furniture and moved into the house. That's the Pat and John story. It's a good story. It's true.
Think of how the proper advice changed the direction of John and Pat Swanton's life. In your action planner on page 19, we suggest here, I will have an appointment with a competent financial planner, write in a date, and go and get the proper advice. Most of us need help in this area. I've often openly admitted it's not an expertise that I possess. Most people don't. Do what Pat and John did. Get the proper advice in this important area. Make your decision right now before you go any further. Put a date and act on it.
We started out this morning talking about the idea or the fact that when we think in pictures. A picture can very well be called an image on the screen of the mind. Now, there's an entire chapter in Born Rich called The Image Maker, and that's what you are, and that's what I am. Let's give John a welcome. He's going to take us through the first part of The Image Maker.
Are we ready? Yes! How do you feel? Wonderful! You know, a number of years ago, I had an opportunity to work in a couple of educational institutions. And if you were to go, how many people from Mississauga? We got some people from Mississauga. You know, as you go up Highway 10, just past Eglinton, you see two big buildings on the left-hand side if you're going north. And one building is the Peel Separate School Board, and the other one is the Public School Board. And I've had an opportunity to speak in one of those beautiful buildings. And any time that I ever go there, I always speak on this subject, psycho-cybernetics. And one of the reasons I speak on it, because really, I think it's the bottom line in not just selling, but in living, period. Because Maxwell Maltz has probably put together the best piece of material that has ever been put together on this subject called psycho-cybernetics. Now, when I go to any one of those places, I will put something like our stick person on the board, and I will put the idea in the bottom part of the personality that we've been referring to, the subconscious mind. And then I will write in there SI, and I ask them to let that represent what is called their self-image. Now I want you to really think about this. I start off every single self-image seminar exactly the same way. And I'll say something like this. We don't have what is called a drug problem on our campuses today. Not at York University, not at the local high school, not at any school in this country. And I will deliberately walk to the podium and I will stop. And I'll pause for about 30 seconds after I make that statement. And you can see people elbowing each other or whispering to each other, wondering, where did they get this one? Because you see, that's kind of a ludicrous statement. Bob mentioned this morning that dis-ease is a symptom. The use of drugs is a symptom, behind which there lies a cause. Because we don't have, as Maltz mentioned, we don't have a drug problem, we don't have a drinking problem, we don't have a financial problem, we don't have a relationship problem, and we don't have, you could say, a productivity problem. The only problem we ever have with respect to those areas is a self-image problem. Now put your thinking cap on and examine this idea. I started off this morning and I said this. You can take anything that I'm going to say, or Bob, and you can reject it. You can do that. Or you can take the information and you can accept it. You can do that. Or you can just neglect it. And I said, don't accept, don't reject, and don't neglect what you hear. But I mentioned that only a fool would not take an idea. Kick that idea around to see if it would change, alter, and or improve the end result for a happier, healthier, more productive life. You see, if there was one thing that I ever wanted to get across to my kids or to you, is that our self-image, it sets the boundaries of performance in your life and in mine. We cannot outperform our self-image. We will never do it. Whether it's weight, and Bob will go over this in detail, whether it's income, whether it's relationships, no matter what it happens to be, our image is the governor that sets the boundaries of performance in each and every area of our life. Our image. Now think about this. I want you to imagine for a moment, I want you to go way back to when Socrates was teaching. Now Socrates taught much, but he wrote very little. Plato took what he learned from Socrates and he put it into words, and we were all the benefactors of the work of Socrates. So Socrates decided that he was going to try to use an analogy to teach people something about this governor, about this concept, about this belief system, this idea, this image of self, and how it controls all the performance in each person's life. And this is the way he was able to do it. He said, I want you to imagine all these prisoners in an underground den. He said they have been there since birth, and they're all lined up beside one another. He said they're chained at the neck, they're chained at the feet, and they're chained at the hands to one another, and they all stand in an even line. They can sit, they can stand, they can turn their head each way, they can take a step this way and a step that way, but that is the extent of it. Which is symbolic to mean that many of us stand on what is called this 50-yard line of life, afraid to go for the goal because we might miss. We don't want to go too far back because we might fail. We don't seem to understand that it's got something to do with the concept or the image we hold of us. He said, now, I want you to imagine that they have never ever laid eyes on human life because the cave is dark, they cannot see one another. Now, he said, in front of all of them, there is a big wall from which shadows are moving back and forth. And he said, from these shadows, there are voices coming as though they're coming right from the shadows directly to the prisoners in this underground den. Are you with me? Now, he said, the shadows and the voices are coming from one area of the den. Way back behind these prisoners, there are people walking back and forth, unaware of the prisoners further in the den. And he said what they are people coming in from the ocean, going up through a cave, carrying treasures from their ships that they took at sea. And as they walk by a flaming fire, and as they do, their shadows bounce off the wall of the den and come back at the prisoners who are staring at the wall. And as they speak, their voices travel and they echo from the wall, so it would appear that the voices and shadows on the wall of the den to the prisoners is real. They have no knowledge of what's going on at the back. Now, I want you to imagine that one day the chains break away from the one prisoner standing at the end of this line. I want you to picture that. He's standing here and the shackles fall from the prisoner. As they fall from him, he looks and he sees a light coming down from the surface of the den, coming out in the shape of an elbow directly in the area he is looking. Now, since all of us, you and I, since all of us are motivated to move in the direction of the light, in other words, every single person in this room is genetically structured to grow, to move in the direction of a light. You put a potato in a cellar, and that potato will grow in the direction of any kind of light coming through to it. Well, this prisoner spots the light and begins to move in that direction. Don't you think that as he begins to move, there would be some apprehension of some kind? And as he gets close to the light, he puts his head into that elbow and he looks up and he experiences the entire spectrum of light to the point it almost blinds him. It's overwhelming. But again, being genetically structured to continue to move in the direction of the light, he begins to climb. And don't you think as he begins to climb, he's going to feel some fear? Yes. And as he reaches the surface, he looks and he sees the sky, some clouds, the trees, and all that nature has to offer. Don't you think he would now be in a state of awe? Yes. Do you think now that what he once thought was real is not necessarily real, that maybe there was something beyond the light? Yes. That in other words, the way he was living and the results that he was getting or that he has, that suddenly now he realizes there is something more he could possibly do? And as he begins to walk around, he comes to a little lake. and he looks in and he sees an image, and he begins to run from the image. Wasn't he looking at an image of self? And as he backtracks, he stands at the den and he can hear the prisoners yell, "Return, we'll offer you rewards to tell us what you found beyond the den." Do you think he'd care for such honors? And if he did go down and tell them what he found, do you think they would believe him? And if he did go back down and he walked up, wouldn't they say, "Ah, you see, up he went, down he came. Isn't it better not to ascend at all?" You see, the real danger is you will never get from the underground den or escape from a prison unless you recognize you're in one. And many of us are like prisoners living in an underground den. And the moment that we begin to attempt to even see ourselves as we would rather, or as we could, or as we want to be, keep in mind we are forever going to be pulled, grabbed, held onto as a hostage by the prisoners in the underground den. By the prisoners in an underground den. Something quickly that I had on here and it's disappeared. Way over in Africa, they take a little beast when it's brand new. It's called an elephant. And they take this little elephant, they put a chain around its leg. And they take this 3-foot chain and they put it on a little stake and they put it in the ground. And you know, for days and days, this little guy, he begins to pull and pull against the stake and chain, but he's too weak at that time to dislodge it. He tries and he tries and he tries for days and days and days, but soon he gives up because he's too weak to pull the chain. Do you know, folks, years and years later, when this beast is fully grown, capable of pulling loaded railway cars, capable of pulling 10 times its own weight, at the end of a working day, they will take him, put the chain around his ankle, put it on that little 3-foot chain onto the stake in the ground. Something that he could pull out at a moment's notice. But he continues to hang on to that chain. He will not move. The only thing that might move the elephant is fire. He will actually stay until he starves to death. What is really holding the elephant? Conditioning? Well, you see, an elephant doesn't have a self-image. But here's the most interesting thing you can learn from what Bob is going to take you through. There isn't a person in this room that was born with a self-image. I think that in that book, one of the, I guess you could say, the greatest point of awareness, that when I read this, was one thing, that I wasn't born with a self-image. But nobody that I've ever met can explain how to alter it like Proctor can. Well, like Proctor can. So at the very top of this page, which is page 21, the ideas contained in this chapter could very well be the breakthrough for you, because image making, once we get a firm grip on it, is a truly dynamic idea. Now believe me, I want to emphasize this. I don't know any one lesson or any half hour or 20 minutes that can alter or effectively alter your life like the one that you're going to experience right now. I want to suggest right at this moment that you'll listen to the cassette and read the chapter over a few times. I would suggest that anybody who would just take this one tape from this chapter and take the book, and if they just exercised it for an entire month, things would never be the same again. What is it Goethe, the great German philosopher, said time and time again? He said, before we can do something, or anything. We must first be something. You see, the great conflict is in what you want to be versus what you want to, what you are versus what you want to be. As you are is not how you must remain. What you want to become, that's what we're working on. So before we can do something, we must first be something. Most people live and die and never fully understand the power of image making. Understand that we are relating this idea to money in this particular chapter and to other areas, as you'll see when we get into it. But I want you to know that once you fully understand the image making concept, you can effectively use it for whatever good that you desire. For whatever good that you desire. You know, the change in relationships alone will absolutely stagger you. Will absolutely stagger you. The way you feel about you, the insensitive comments that you may get, you know, they'll hit you and they'll just rebound off you like water off a fish, because you'll have an understanding now that you're in control. Not the comment. Not the person that's making it. You'll be in control. It says the knowledge of image making eliminates competition from your life. Think about this. Professionals create, amateurs compete. Professionals create, amateurs compete. The whole idea here is a simple one. In conflict, you have two choices. You have a choice to defend yourself, or you have a choice to learn in the conflict. If you make the choice to defend yourself, you're going to try to protect yourself. If you protect yourself, you're going to blame someone. And if you blame someone, you're going to miss all the joy that could be yours. But if you take the attitude to learn, you're going to make it. One last statement, and then I want to bring Bob back on. The Spanish distiller at the bottom of the page, just draw a circle around it, because you see you're either a prisoner in the underground den or you're on the surface enjoying all the greatness, all the goodness, and all the joy that is your birthright. The good life then is expensive. There's another way to live that doesn't cost much, but it isn't any good. It isn't any good. So let's get the old level of energy up again and bring on Robert.
Okay. Thank you, John. On page 22 in your action planner, I want to suggest that you take the chapter on the image maker and read it over a couple of times. Not once, read it over 2 or 3 times. I have found that as we read things over, they start to take on a different meaning. I read somewhere in a book where it said, when you read a good book through the second time, you don't see something in it you didn't see before. You see something in yourself that wasn't there before. So as we go through this chapter a couple of times, we'll start to relate to it a little different. Now, I want to suggest that at the end of this particular lesson, you sit down with the new understanding that you have from the information we've already covered, and stop and ask yourself, what areas of my life would I really like to change? Take a look at some of the results you're getting at the bottom of page 22 and list some of the results you'd like to change. Now, at the top of page 23 is a quote that come out of Maxwell Maltz's classic Psycho-Cybernetics. Psyche being Greek for mind, cybernetics being the science of control and communication in our marvelous mind. Now, Maltz said, we act, we behave, and feel. Now think of what we're talking about here. We act, we behave, and we feel. The vibration that we're in most of the time, according to what we consider our self-image to be. And we do not deviate from that pattern. This is the one stumbling block that many people have. You're going to hear from a man in a few minutes that made a phenomenal change just through understanding this one idea. And I'm going to tell you, the man was brilliant when he got the idea. It was just one small change. This could be the one you want to make. Now, Maltz explained that the image you hold of yourself is a premise, a base, or a foundation. It's nothing but an idea in your mind upon which your entire personality is built. He concluded this image not only controls your behavior, yet controls your circumstance as well. Now, it would take a respectable understanding to grasp that. How could an idea in our mind literally change the circumstances in our life? Well, by the time you finish this seminar, the various subjects in it, you're going to know exactly how those circumstances can change. It'll be very clear to you. But I can assure you, you alter this image in your mind that John was talking about. You take this idea of what you want to be and learn how to plant it in here and release this idea. Like that, your life will change. And you're going to hear from someone who made a big change. Now, let's take a look at this idea of cybernetics. You know, a number of years ago, many years ago, I bought this book. It was out around 1960, and it was shortly after that I got it. And like most of these books I get, I read it over and over and over again. Now, let me digress for a second. I was in a seminar that Dr. Harry Roeder was conducting. And I'm going to tell you, this man is brilliant. He has an enormous amount of information of why we do what we do. And I remember we were working with a loose leaf exercise book. It was in Chicago that I was in the seminar, although Dr. Roeder is a Canadian. And he said something that really sunk in, and on the first page in the book, I wrote it. He said, you do not understand something until you can explain it to someone else so that they understand it. Now run that through your computer a couple of times. You do not understand something until you can explain it to someone else so that they understand it. Now that was written in a book a long time ago. I wrote it as Harry said it. I'd read this book before that. And I read it off and on every year or two. I'll read it a couple of times. Someone came up to me in a seminar one day years ago, and they said, Bob, do you know what cybernetics means? And I said, yeah. They said, well, what does it mean? I said, well, it's, and all I could see was the front page of that book where Dr. Roeder said, you do not understand something until you can explain it to someone else so that they understand. And I didn't know how to explain it. Now, this chapter, or this paragraph on page 23 is right out of this book. I went and got the book out again, and I started to study it. And I got some other books on cybernetics, some real heavy stuff, and I started to study it. Now, let's read it. Cybernetics is a science of control and communication in the animal and in some machines. It is based on the fact that both biological organisms and some machines have sensors that measure deviation from a set goal. These sensors signal feedback into a coordinating mechanism, your nervous system, which corrects the output or the behavior of those same organisms or machines. Now, if you're reading a page and you go spinning past that paragraph, I think you'll have to admit it'd be pretty easy not to understand what you've just read. Now, you just read, in fact, I read it to you and you probably followed me. You might ask yourself, could you really explain that to someone? Well, I obviously couldn't. That's why it's so essential that we listen to this over and over again. A couple of us were talking at the break, and this gentleman just come back. He came back, he'd just been through the seminar, he came back through it again. And he says, it's so much different. And I said, every time you go through it, it's different. I said, that's because you're operating with a higher awareness, and you'll see things you weren't able to see before. Now, turn over onto page 24. This page could be worth its weight in gold along with the other two pages. Let's let this circle that you see at the top of the page, you're at the top of page 24, let that represent a thermostat in your home. And we take this thermostat and we set the dial to control the room temperature at 72 degrees. That is the set goal. Now, what they say? It says it has a sensor in it to measure deviation from a set goal. It signals this deviation into a coordinating mechanism which then corrects the output. Let's suppose the room temperature is at 72 degrees. Someone leaves the front door open and it's cold. You're in the northern part of North America and the temperature drops quickly to 68 degrees. The sensor in the thermostat picks up that deviation. It sends a message through the electrical system in the house to the furnace. The fire's turned on, the fan's turned on, until that room temperature is brought back under control again at 72, then it cuts out. Let's look at it in another machine. We'll say this is an airplane. Well, that wasn't nice. I'll bet you couldn't draw it any better. It's quite obvious I haven't majored in art. Like the guy said he majored in the minors. All right. Now, this airplane, let's suppose it leaves Pearson International Airport in Toronto, and it's going to LAX or Los Angeles in California. When the pilot leaves the vicinity of the international airport here in Toronto, the pilot sets a cybernetic mechanism. That's called an automatic pilot. Then you see the guy with the 4 stripes wandering down the plane and, how are you today, sir? You having a nice trip? Enjoying yourself, ma'am? I used to sit there and I think, why doesn't he get back in that room up front? I didn't feel particularly comfortable screaming through the sky at that height and the guy that's in charge of the ship wandering around, inquiring as to the state of my health. But I would feel much healthier if I didn't see you wandering around this plane. But it didn't make any difference. He could have come back and sat with us. That plane was under control. It had an automatic pilot, a cybernetic mechanism. Now, let's suppose that airplane got hit with some unexpected turbulence and bang, it got knocked off course. The automatic pilot would pick up the deviation from the set goal. If it didn't, this thing might end up somewhere down around Juarez, Mexico. It signals a message through the electrical system in the airplane. The wings are changed. The engine thrust is changed, and that plane is brought right back under control again. Now come down and take a look at these two people on page 24. We'll just draw one. This person has an image in their mind. I'll use a concept that we could all relate to. Let's suppose this person's a salesperson or they're a student. You could use either one. Let's suppose the salesperson sells $1 million worth of their product or service every year. Do you know large sales organizations can pretty well tell you what their sales force is going to write at the beginning of the year? If they have a contest and they send them off to some exotic place on a trip for writing so much business, and they name where they're going to go today and they're not going to go for a year, do you know that they can book the seats on the plane now? They know exactly how many rooms that they're going to rent. That's because people very rarely deviate from their set objective. They're locked into a habit pattern. Or we could switch this and let's say it's a student that gets a C average. Now, this salesperson may get a real pep talk in a sales meeting or something. No understanding, just motivation, no education. They get all wound up and they go out and in a week they write $350,000 worth of business. Their self-image picks up the deviation from the set goal, sends it into a coordinating mechanism, the nervous system. A signal is sent and the behavioral patterns will change and that person will quit selling until they're back on course again. Now, they may go through a period where they write nothing for a month. Self-image picks up that information, sends a message through the nervous system. The behavioral patterns will change. They'll get up and they'll start selling again. But at the end of the year, they still have written $1 million worth of business. Let's suppose it's a student that's getting a C average. They bring the report card home. Parents turn the heat up, turn the TV off, bicycle goes, girlfriends, boyfriends are out of the picture. Really put the pressure on the kid. The marks shoot up and they get 100% on a test. Self-image picks up that information, sends a message to the nervous system. The behavioral patterns will change, and pretty soon that child's back on course again. What's causing the problem? It's this image in here. That's what it is. That's not what they want to be, but that's what they are. At the bottom of the page, that drawing. On page 25, results in control of you, you in control of results. If you were to look in your Born Rich book on page 62, there's a story of a man that I am very proud to call my friend, and John's friend as well. This man started into the insurance business in the southern part of the United States 38 years ago. He had just left college. He was 23 years old. He worked as an agent, a salesperson, for 3 years. Then he moved into management. He held a number of management positions. As a matter of fact, he became the vice president of sales for the states of Kansas, Missouri, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. John and I both did a lot of work for him in that area. And I'm going to tell you, he is a good man. There is just absolutely no question about it. And he is well-liked and respected. Big difference in the two, of both of them. This man today decided that he wanted to quit traveling and he wanted to move back to his roots. I often ask people in the seminar, how many of you are living in the house you choose to live in? I don't very often get many hands up. This man would be able to hold his hand up because I've been in that house. I've slept there, I've eaten there on a number of occasions. And I'm going to tell you, it's one of the nicest houses I've ever been in. But it's a little more than a house, it's a real comfortable home. It really is. And you feel welcome when you walk into that place. The energy in there is just incredible. He's got a just an absolutely beautiful wife, Tip. She is really a grand gal. I mean, she is something special. He's not only busy in the sales field, he's got 5 children and 19 grandchildren. You'd almost think the guy was 150, wouldn't you? This beautiful house he owns, he not only sells, he gets involved in some physical labor. It's way back in off the road. And I'm going to tell you, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It's got its own little lake. He decided to brick the driveway. And he was going to put them all in himself. Now, not being too fond of manual labor, I took a look at what he was starting, and I thought, the poor guy's got to need a psychiatrist. You know, I asked him this morning or last night, how many bricks did you lay there? And he said, 55,000. Give you an idea how long the driveway is. It's all his property. He wasn't bricking somebody else's driveway. Some of you will really appreciate the significance of this, and some of you may not. This man lives in a town of 17,000 people, where the average income is below the national poverty level. In spite of that, he has the largest agency in the Prudential Insurance Company of America. He has 60 agents and 8 managers. Now, this is absolutely phenomenal. He operates one of the largest, not one of the, he operates the largest agency, and certainly one of the most successful. He's a man that really believes in what he does. Not a lot of people do. I've met his children, and Janie, his daughter, is the mother of 3 beautiful little kids. She works in the same company Paul works in. She's an agent too. And Joe, his son-in-law, he's an agent in the same company that Paul's in. I like it when I see a person bringing their own family into the same business they're in. It speaks well of what they think of their business. I think of all the things I could say about this man. He's a man of integrity, and you are more than fortunate in meeting him. Believe me, you really are. He's a very special friend of mine and John's, and I phoned him just a little over a week ago, and I said, you know, I've got an idea that it would really add something to this program, because there will be millions of people watching this all over the world. Within a couple of months, this particular seminar that you're sitting in will be on the market in New Zealand, Australia, in England, and in every city in North America. I wanted those people to know this man. But even more than that, I wanted them to hear from the person themselves how a man took the idea on this page and like that, put it to work, and the difference it made in his life. And I'm going to tell you something, you could not consider him a loser when he got this idea by any stretch of the imagination. He's a very special guy. I want you to stand up and really give this man a warm welcome. It's Paul Hutsey from Pittsburgh, Kansas.
As I pause to think about what sets most men apart, it seems to me that goals in life is a place to start. Imagine playing football on an unmarked field of green. Not a goal line to be sought, not a goal post to be seen. It would be an aimless battle with nothing to be gained, without a thing to strive for, not a score to be obtained. We must have purpose in our lives for the flame that warms the soul. Every man must have purpose. Every man must have a goal. The question is, why are you here today? Well, I think you're here today because you want more of the good life. Right, Nino? And that's the way I was in August of 1975 when I came to this great city, when our company had a conference here. And on the last day, they were introducing the speaker, and they were telling what an outstanding personality he was, and that he was going to speak for 3 hours in a row without a break. And I leaned over to the guy next to me, and I said, I wish this guy good luck in his next job because he's on his way out of this one. I couldn't imagine anybody talking for 3 hours, and then this red-headed guy ran up on this stage and started jumping up and down, and as he began to talk, why, he talked about different ideas. He talked about the way you think. And he talked about the great law. And he talked about the picture of your mind. And as he talked, well, there came a hush over the crowd, and he really mesmerized people for 3 hours. Now, I've heard a lot of speakers, but this man kind of charged me up. And when it was over, I said to him, could you and I have a cup of coffee together? And without a minute hesitation, Heather, he said, yeah. Now, one of the great things about Bob Proctor is that he's a great giver. And sometimes people give you 2 or 3 minutes. But we went off and we sat down and we talked for a long time. And I said to him, you know, some of the things that you said today kind of turned me on. I don't see myself as a loser. And I'm considered to be a good manager. One of the bright ones, they tell me, in the company today. They say I'm a motivator, I'm a good speaker, but things never really seem to happen in my life. Why is that? The things that you're talking about. And he says, I can see very clearly what's wrong with you, and it will only take me about, It will only take me about 15 minutes to straighten you up. So he talked for a while. He said, looky, I'm coming to Kansas. This is August. He said, I'm coming to Kansas in October to do some seminars for your company. I'll see you then. I didn't want to wait till October. I said, I want to know about this now. He said, I'm traveling Indiana and Illinois next week. If you want to come with me, come on. So for a whole week, I traveled with him. And there was 8 parts of that seminar, and we did 4 of them that week. And then at night when everybody else went to home, well, he did the other 4 with me. Now let me tell you a little bit about how those ideas impacted my life and the lives of people around me and that I've been able to impact. Because I began to see possibilities. I began to see doors instead of walls. That was October when he came to Kansas. My agency at that time was about 180 in a company, and in 2 months we went to 72. And then later that year, why, I was transferred to another district. That district had not won a citation in the company for 8 years. One of Prudential's highest awards. When I got there, we were 163. The first year, using these ideas we're talking about right now, we finished 11 in the company out of 500. And then 9, and then 4. And then 80 and 81, we were the #1 agency in the company in first-year commissions, and that's the name of the game. Everybody understands that. First-year commissions is the name of the game. And we did that in a town of 17,000 people, as he said. But I've come to understand that it's not where you are that counts, but who you are, Tammy. Now, what's the difference? What was the difference between the Paul Hutsey then and the Paul Hutsey later? Well, I've come to understand this, that there's very little difference in most people. But that little bit of difference is the way you think. And that makes a big difference. You know, William James, a great philosopher, one time said that the greatest discovery of our century is that you can change your life by changing the way you think. So from a practical point of view, from somebody that's on the street like I am, let me tell you about how these ideas that Bob talks about might impact your life and the things that they might do for you. I do some public speaking, do some seminars for companies. I've developed some of my own ideas, laws that I call on, that I share with other people, and let me share some of those with you. First of all, let me talk to you about the law of repetition. And I'm going to go through this real quickly. But I think it's the number of times that you try something that's really going to make the big difference in your life. You see, the reason why you need to read your books and your tapes very often is because of repetition, spaced repetition. It is the number of times. That's why the video that we're doing right now is so important for you to have. Just think about having Bob Proctor in your house every day. I promise you that if you would take 15 minutes a day and listen to one part of this tape, you will be an expert on that part. But what happens while you're doing this is that you develop a habit. And that's what happens when you develop ideas long. You develop a habit that you couldn't break that habit if you wanted to. I could not harbor a negative thought if I wanted to. I'll give you a great classic example of that. Helen Keller is one of all the great time people. She one time coined a phrase that says, every time a door closes, another one opens. But some people concentrate on the door that's closed so much that they never see the door that's open. Now, when you practice these ideas, then I'm saying that you always get a chance to see the door that's open. Now, this time he has said so many times today, it's been said so many times today, that if you practice these ideas, and this is a quote that came directly out of Think and Grow Rich, if you practice these ideas long enough, riches will come your way so fast you don't know where they're coming from. Now, if you have a big goal in life, if there's something big that you want to achieve, then there's a decision that you're going to have to make right away. What are you willing to give or give up to have what you want? You see, nature's greatest law is the law of cause and effect. Emerson calls this the law of laws. The great law that says you can't take more out of life than what you put into it. No way that that can happen. Now, why is it then that we don't achieve big goals? Even more so, why don't we set big goals? Why is that? Well, you know why. It's a universal reason. Fear. Fear of failure is the reason why most people don't try to do things. What if I try and fail? What if he asks me a question and I can't answer? I don't know how it is right now, but when I was a young kid and we had a school dance, why, the girls all stood on that side of the wall, you know, and the guys stood on this side of the wall, and Esther was the cutest girl and the best dancer in school, and I really wanted to dance with her. But I was afraid to walk across there and ask her to dance, and she might say, oh, you got pimples, you know, and then I'd have to walk back and all the guys would laugh at me, see, and so I didn't get what I wanted because I was afraid to try. Now, let me tell you how you overcome the fear of failure. You overcome the fear of failure by having a goal that's worth failing for. That may be the most important thing I say to you all day long, is having a goal that's worth failing for, worth taking a chance. You see, I've come to understand that failure is a very positive part of your life, is that you cannot have failure without success, and that you cannot have success without failure. It's both sides of a coin. So, I think about these things, and when I talk about having a goal that's worth failing for, I'm talking about having a big goal, Tammy. Something that excites you, something that turns on. You see, there's really two kinds of goals. There's logical goals and emotional goals, John. Logical goals are reasonable. You do those for intelligent reasons. I tell salesmen who have logical goals, you're going to raise skinny kids. Confucius said, man shoot at nothing, sure to hit it. What I'm saying to you in your life, your goals have to be emotional. They have to be something that makes you feel great when you achieve them. See, there's intangible goals and tangible ones. The tangible one is the car, the house, the boat. But you don't want the car or the house or the money. What you want is the way it makes you feel. And that's a great understanding. That's why you have to have the emotional goals, because of the way it makes you feel. Now, when you have a big goal in your life, an intangible goal, emotional goal, then you are going to have conflict. You are going to have adversity. You are going to have circumstances. This may be the most important thing I will say to you today, is that there'll never be a circumstance on the outside of you that will ever help you or hurt you. It's what's on the inside that counts. So as you reach out for something big, why then you're going to have conflict, you're going to have adversity, and that's when the greatest law, and you've heard it talked about today, the greatest power you have comes into being. That's the power to choose. That is your greatest power. I talk about that so much that I think that pretty much the sum of your life right now is the sum of the choices that you've made. And that if you want something better out of life, it may be just as simple as changing some of the choices. But let me tell you, when you want a bigger bite out of life, then you're going to have adversity. And I'm saying it's not adversity, but the way you act to adversity. Personal example. Bob talked about the house. I've always had a dream when I was a little kid. I always wanted a house that set on 10 acres just outside of town. Set up on a hill with a lot of trees, a red barn on it, and a couple of lakes, and a winding driveway. I always had that idea. And when I came back from the home office back to Pittsburgh, I said, this is the time to start doing what you wanted to do. And so I started looking for 10 acres just outside of town. And guess what? There wasn't any 10 acres outside of town. Everybody else wanted 10 acres outside of town. And if I wanted 10 acres, I had to go about 10 miles outside of town. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted 10 acres outside of town. And because I couldn't find 10 acres just outside of town, guess what I did? I started looking for 10 acres inside town. And guess what? I found two. I found 2 lots, 10 acres inside town. I found them because that's what I was looking for. So if you go down to 510 South Georgia right now, well, you'll kind of drive into her trees, and then when you get there, well, it just pops up at you. It's an 800-foot driveway that snakes down through there, and the red barn is there, and the 2 lakes are there. There's trees all over the place. You see, those things were there all the time. Those 10 acres, I live closer to City Hall than 2/3 of the people in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And guess how much I had to pay for that? A lot of money, right? I had to pay very little because the guy didn't think it was worth anything. Because he didn't have the vision that I had of that. My point is that you pretty much get what you're looking for. Now let me give you a side story that goes with that. That really ties into this whole seminar and the things that we're talking about right now. More of the good life. 10 acres is a lot to mow. 10 acres is a lot to mow. So I'm cutting my grass, and there's some people that their acreage bumps up right next to ours, and they had a horse. And I'm over there cutting. The woman saws me. We haven't met each other. She comes running across. I get off the tractor, walked over to her, leaned on the fence. It was hot. It was wired. She said, oh, we should disconnect that. She said, you know, when we first got the horse, he used to lean up against that fence and it would break it down, so we wired it. And then once we wired it, why, he wouldn't even get anywhere near it. So we tacked and left, and the next day, I'm going to work. The front of their property dead ends into a street that comes back from my office. These people both work. I come home at 11:30. There's the horse loose in the front yard. I thought the horse was loose, but they had taken a single strand of baling wire, tacked it onto the house, over to this tree, over to that tree, back to this house right there, and inside was the horse. Now that horse could jump over it, crawl under it, tear it down, but he stays there all the time. How come? Because he thinks that wire is hot. He is fenced in, right? My question, how many of us are fenced in? How many of us are a slave to the past? How many of us are not doing things that we really would like to do because of the past? You see, I think choosing is important, and I'll tell you, I think a very important statement is that getting in life is not difficult, but deciding what you want. Getting what you want in life ain't tough, but deciding what you want, choosing what you want is tough. Let me talk to you about just a simple idea that I think involves with, and now we get around to the point that you want to talk about here. Self. You need to be an expert as a self-starter. Self-motivated. Self-control. But most important, self-esteem. Self-image. You know, Bob's always talking about this. But the result I was getting over here was the same as the picture I had in here. And when I changed the picture in here, the result over here changed. And the same thing can happen to you. Anybody in this room. Let me tell you why. Because God only made one just like you. He made you in his own image and likeness. He made you just like him, and part of him's in part of you, and that means you're a winner. You're one of God's ideas. Isn't that great to know that? That you're one of God's ideas. Bob used to tell a story when he first came to Pittsburgh. Now, I don't know whether he even remembers this. But he talks about a great sculptor who hauled out a piece of granite, and he began chipping away. And every day a little guy come to see him work. And after several weeks, while he was finished, and the great sculptor stood back to take a look at what he had done. And he said to and it was a body of a great, beautiful Greek god. And he said to the little guy, he said, well, what do you think about that? The little guy waited for a minute and said, mister, how'd you know that guy was in there? Well, I'm saying that guy was in there all the time. You're a Mona Lisa. What makes a Mona Lisa so valuable? What's rare? Just one of a kind. And you're just one of a kind. But it's how you see you that makes a difference. How does the quote go? The me I see is the me I'll be. In Robert Schuller's latest book, failure is never fatal, success is never final. He tells a story about a small kid playing baseball by himself in the backyard, and he said, "I'm the world's greatest baseball player." He throw that ball up and swing at it, missed it. "I'm the world's greatest baseball player," threw it up again, missed it. "I'm the world's greatest baseball player," threw it up, missed it, strike three. He said, "Wow, what a pitcher I am." Let me tell you that you hold the picture of what you really want, and it's just a matter of time. The ancient Chinese proverb says, the longest journey begins with a single step. I say that beginning is half done, and that you need to start right now. And one of the reasons why I like Bob Proctor and his ideas is that I think that he's a great giver. And this is just a side dimension from what we're talking about, but sometimes people ask me, you know, why I wear that number 2 pin. And I got the number 2 pin from Bob Proctor a long time ago because he cares about people. I wear the number 2 pin to always constantly remind me to always put the other guy first. You always put the other guy first, and he'll always put you first. And a great guy one time said that the first shall come last, and the last shall come first. And I'm convinced that the ideas that Bob has got is great, but he practices his idea. He cares. He doesn't do this because of money. He does this because of feeling. And his feeling is that if you get a picture of what you really want, then it's just a matter of time until you have it. So let me wrap this up, Bob, and just with a quote that came right out of the book that he's talking about right now of James Allen. And this is what the whole seminar is about right now, where it says, the vision that you glorify in your mind, the ideal that you enthrone in your heart, this you will build by your life, and this you will become. It's really been nice to come and be with you in Toronto again. It's my personal pleasure. Bob, and thanks for having me, friend.
Hey! You know, I've shared Paul's story with countless thousands of people, but it was really nice to be able to share Paul with the people today, and with all the people that are going to be watching this in their homes and in their offices all over the place. Paul talked about the self that you have here is what's going to determine what you're going to be. John talked about I never noticed the difference in that, Paul, but I always found the Americans crucified our language. At any rate. And I guess the Canadians crucified the English language. But at any rate, you have an image here in your subconscious mind. Now, the first step in changing that picture is in your exercise book, your action planner on page 26. So often, as Paul mentioned to me, for 22 years, every year he promised he was going to get one of those citations, but he said, I never got it. Emerson said, of what use to make heroic vows of amendment if the same old lawbreaker is going to keep them? You see, Paul was trying to get that citation with the same old picture. And the only thing I suggested to Paul, and it didn't take long, was how to change the picture. And I said, you change the picture, Paul, and I said, your results will change so fast, you'll be shocked. Now, this never happens by accident. You've got to put forth a little effort. Remember how John started out? He said you put a little in, you get a little out. Some people put a little in, but they put a lot of energy behind it. They still get a little back. If you put a whole lot into it, you'll get a whole lot back. Now, what I want to suggest as this lesson comes to an end, I want to suggest that you go someplace quiet by yourself and think. I mean, really think. Life is precious. There's absolutely no question about it. I think that there's enough evidence just in what we've covered in this seminar to indicate to you that you can have, do, or be the things you want. Now, it was no accident that Paul got that house. It's no accident that he runs the largest agency in all of the United States of America, in the world, with that company. And in a town of only 17,000 people, where the average income is below the national poverty level. That's no accident. That's how Paul sees his people operating. And as a result, everyone benefits. Not just the people in his agency, but all the people they serve. Now, we're suggesting here that you make a written description of the person you're about to become. Now, that's not going to make you that person. We're going to get into how to take that image and turn it over in the next lesson. But I want to suggest that you sit down and you really think. Realize this power is flowing into you. As it flows in, we said it just is. It's without form. You make it what you want. And I'm suggesting that you build into your mind a picture of exactly how you want to live. Don't give any thought to how it's going to happen. We're not at that point yet. One step at a time. What kind of a person do you want to be? Where do you want to be in your commercial career? What kind of a financial position do you want to be in? I can tell you one thing with absolute certainty. When Paul got this idea, he was already winning. When John and I got it, we were miserable losers. And I know that if I can do it, anyone can do it. I've gone into prisons with this, and so has John. We've worked with people who are right down and out, the castaways. And we've watched them literally change their life just through these simple concepts. And so can you. But you've got to decide, how do you want to change it? You don't get the house by wishing. You decide, what kind of house do you want? Now, don't just build a picture of being a wealthy person. When Ray Stanford first suggested I could change, that's all I was interested in. And I got it. Howard Hughes did too. But he ended up alone and lonely and in a very defiled body. Now, build an image of being happy, of being healthy, and of being wealthy. And I would suggest that you build into it the kind of an attitude that you want for everyone else, what you want for yourself. And your life will be absolutely incredible. Now, all you have to do is build this picture in your mind. And when this lesson's over, I'm going to suggest you go somewhere quiet and do that. Don't put it off. Do it. Don't wait till tomorrow, next week, next month, 5 years from now. Waste all that time. You do it before you go to bed today. Sit down, take your pen, and right here on page 26, describe exactly how you want to live. And when we get into the next lesson, we're going to show you how to firmly plant that image into this part of your mind, and I'll guarantee you, you'll change. And you'll change fast. Now, you just heard from a gentleman from Pittsburgh, Kansas. He's flown all the way up here just to share that with you, that it does work for him. Now think. He tried for 22 years. You can tell by looking at him he's a good man. For 22 years, he tried to get what he wanted, and he couldn't do it. You'll never do it through force. You'll do it through faith and by law. And we're going to show you how to put it in there tomorrow.
You'll have to admit, Paul Huntzy sure changed the direction of his life and that of all his family with the proper image. He was something else, wasn't he? Well, we're at the halfway point now. I might suggest that before you even go any further, you might want to go back and review all of this material. It's so important to you and your life. Now focus on your goal. Sit back and really think, what do I really want? Like Paul, It might be that dream house.
Holding on to the key, ready to unlock your destiny. Oh, rich, rich, rich. Holding on to the key, ready to unlock your destiny.
There's one or two key points in this seminar that I have stressed thousands of times. It's vitally important that you follow them properly. On page 26 in your action planner, it's suggested that you make a written description of the person you are about to become. I couldn't stress this enough. I've pointed that there's 2 pages in this book that can literally change your life. This is the first one. Now, what I want to suggest you do, it may seem foolish, it may seem like a fantasy, but I can assure you it works. I want you to stop and think of exactly how you would like to be. The type of person you really want to be. Write it in as much detail as possible on page 26, and write it in the present tense. You may draw on different people that you admire and respect as role models that you might want to emulate this part or that part of their personality. But make this in as much detail as possible in the present tense. Begin by writing, "I am so happy that I am," and then describe the person you truly want to become in as much detail as possible. Don't go any further until that part of this exercise book is filled in. Don't spend 5 seconds wondering how you're going to become this person. Just make it very clear the person you want to become. We'll tell you later on how to execute the image. When you have that completed, turn your tape back on, and John Canary is going to introduce you to a concept of how this great power within us takes over and does what we want.
I always like to kind of get into this lesson with a particular idea because, you know, we're into something that make a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And just to make sure that we're all in the same chapter here, we're over on page 27 where it states, "Let go and let God." You know, it's a cute little story about Billy and Johnny. They were having a little bit of trouble in town on an ongoing basis. And Mom didn't know quite how to handle this. Dad had been gone for years, and if something went wrong, these kids would hide in the basement because they would get blamed for it whether they were involved in the activity or not. Well, Mom took a run down to the minister there, brought Billy and Johnny with her. And she walked in, she said, "You know, Reverend, I don't know quite what to do. These 2 boys are constantly in trouble, and every time something goes wrong, they get blamed for it, and I don't know quite how to handle it." Well, he said, "Listen, Mom, you just go on home there. I'm going to take care of this situation right now." And the way she went, he said, "Now, Billy, I want you to sit in the hallway here in that chair. And Johnny, I want you in my office." Well, Johnny got in there, and he sat him in that chair, and the old Reverend there, he just sat back in that big old oak desk. And he looked down, and he said, "Now, Johnny, we're going to start with some questions, and the first one is, where is God?" Well, Johnny just sat up on that chair there, started to vibrate, you know, in a state of confusion, didn't know quite what to do, blood vessels started to dilate, and he's trying to get a word out. He said, "Come on, Johnny, right now, where's God?" Well, he started to spit, stammer, and stutter, whatever the case might be, and he said, "Johnny, this is the last time I'm going to ask you, where's God?" Well, Johnny just up off that chair and beat it down the hallway, put on the brakes, grabbed Billy, said, "Billy, we got to get out of here. God's missing, and they're going to blame that one on us, too." In this marvelous book that everyone has in their kit, when you pick up and you read this chapter, I want you to keep something in mind. That for 8,000 years, all of the great thinkers, they have all disagreed with one another on many, many different things. But you know, there was only one thing that they were in complete and unanimous agreement with. Just one. That there is a power in this universe. And they say that this power, that it animates, it penetrates, and it motivates the entire cosmos. Now, not too long ago on a TV show, Madam O'Hare was being interviewed by Phil Donahue. And Donahue, she's the lady who's the head of the atheist movement. And she denied the existence of any power in this universe. But one night she was being interviewed by Dick Cavett, and Dick Cavett, you see, he didn't get emotionally involved in the idea. He stopped and he started to think, and he was able to reason with her without him losing control. And she said the only good thing about believing in a power is that you get a lot of holidays. And Dick Cavett said to her, you get a holiday every single year, as all atheists do. And she said, when is that? And he said, on April the 1st. Now, if you were to go to the Ark of Apollo at Delphi, you'll see just two words inscribed over that ark at Delphi. And those two words go like this. It said, know thyself. But what do we really know about us and what this power is that animates, flows through us, flows with us? I mean, that really is what we are all about. This power that Bob referred to so much yesterday as spirit. Now, to properly do this exercise, we're going to have to define or try or attempt to define this power. But you see, if you define something, then you place limits on it. So you see, the way we're going to define it will not limit it. As a matter of fact, it will show that it is unlimited and that it is infinite. In a marvelous book that I brought out here with me this morning called Your Invisible Power, Genevieve Behrend, I think, put it together well in this book when she said, to get good results in our life, we must properly understand our relationship to this great impersonal power. Now think about what she said. If we are going to get, she said, the kind of results that we want, we are going to have to understand our relationship to this here great, all-encompassing, this great impersonal power. Now she said, this power is intelligent. You and I, we are intelligent. But she said it is these two intelligences working together that determine the kind of results that we get. Well then, where do we go to find out a little bit more about this power? You see, if you examine it, there's 178 different names to describe it. I mean, we got Baha'i, Vishnu, Krishna, Muhammad, Buddha, and the list goes on and on and on. Rather than talk about the name, why don't we try to define the activity to see how it operates to, with, and through us? Now, you see, if I were in the United States today, and the people that are here from the U.S., you check this out with them. If I were to ask them if they've paid their hydro bill, what kind of response do you think I'm going to get? Brian? They would think they paid their water bill or something. But you see, you know what I mean by hydro bill. But they're not sure what I mean by hydro bill. But isn't it really the very same power? Yes, no. It's the very same power. Well, you see, this power that we're talking about, rather than try to define its name, let's see if we can define the activity. Now, if you're going to find out what it is, you're going to have to go to two sources of reference, the only two that are available. And one is science, and the other is theology. They are the only two sources of reference we can go to if we're going to try to find out anything. Now, you'll find this in the chapter on Let Go and Let God in that book, and I'd suggest that you read it and reread it until you not only gain an intellectual comprehension, but until you can gain what is called an inner spiritual emotional intelligence. You see, the individual that works only with intellectual intelligence, they're really not going to accomplish a whole lot. But the individual that can work with that inner emotional or spiritual intelligence, that individual will open themselves up to unlimited possibilities. So if we're going to define this power, and we were to go to the scientist and say, what is this power that animates, penetrates, and motivates the cosmos? Why can I walk and talk? What keeps that wall standing? What about night and day? Why is there such order in these cosmos? How do I know where there's a certain star going to be 1,000 years from now and time it within a fraction of a second? Well, the scientist will tell you there is a power that animates the cosmos, and the scientist will say he will call, or she will call, that power energy. That's the name they use to describe this activity. Now, if you ask, well, what is energy? This is the only thing the scientist can tell you. And remember, the word science means to know. It means organized knowledge. Well, then ask, what is energy? And this is the only thing science can tell you. That energy just is. It is neither created nor destroyed. It is the cause and effect of itself. And it is 100% evenly present in all places at all times. Doesn't that mean right in here, Shirley? Doesn't that mean right in here, Leslie? All places at all times. It didn't say 20% in Scarborough, 50% in Tennessee. 100% evenly present in all places at all times, is almighty and is all-powerful. That's fine. You may say, well, I choose not to believe that. Well, you're entitled to believe what you want. But remember this, if you don't believe in something, you're going to fall for anything. So we can cross that one out if you like, but some of you will not. Well, that only leaves you one place left to go. And if you were to go over to theology, and what does theology mean? Well, theology just means one thing, the study of God, at least in this part of the world. In another part, it may be Baha'i, Vishnu, Krishna, Muhammad, Buddha, again, it goes on and on and on the list. But if you were to ask the theologian, I just left the scientist, I'm trying to find out, what is this power that animates, penetrates, and motivates the cosmos? Say, I just left down there, and I'm trying to find out a little bit about this power. I mean, you've been told that if you do this, thus, and so, you're going to win, that you have great potential. Have you ever been told that, John? Have you ever been told, honey, if you change your attitude, we get along better? And if you change your attitude, you could use your potential and you could be more effective? You ever been told that, Jim? On a daily basis? Sure you have. But you see, the scientist, I went to this scientist and they told me something about this energy. Now you go over to the other side and you ask the theologian. And the theologian will say, yes, there is a power in this universe that keeps everything in working order. But we have a name for the power in this part of the world. What do they call? What is the name they use in this part of the world? So you see, we take that symbol and we put it on the board, and then we ask the theologian, well, tell me, what is, who is, what do you mean by God? Can you give me a definition? And this is the only thing the theologian can tell you. Because remember, you cannot limit it. And the theologian will say, there is a power in these cosmos that we call God, and God just is. Neither created nor destroyed. He is the cause and effect of himself. And he is 100% evenly present in all places at all times. Now it seems to me that I heard that just a few minutes ago. So the only thing that has changed is the name. The activity is the same. And it is clearly demonstrated in the book. You'll find in this book something Werner von Braun stated. Bob quoted Werner von Braun. Von Braun pointed out that science are studying, you could say, the energy and the force around humanity. Theology are studying the force within humanity. And they're eventually going to find out that they are studying one and the same force. You see, when we understand what B. Rand said, it is intelligent, we are intelligent, but it is the working relationship with this power that brings about the kind of results we get, because it can't do for you what it can only do through you. Gosh, I'd give just about anything for a person to get a hold of that or to understand that. That it cannot do for you what it can only do through you. Think about that. Now, would you go over to page 27? We got to move on here. And at the very top of the page, for centuries, there has been a select group of people who are the real thinkers. I mean, we could name many. Edison, Emerson, Thoreau. I mean, there are so many, we could be here all day talking about them. But every one of them, although they had different ideas and different philosophies, this is the one thing they were in complete and unanimous agreement with. These individuals have always known there is a power which permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the cosmos, and that everything you see around you is an expression of that power, and so is everything which you feel. The power operates in a very precise manner, which is generally called law. We choose to call it God. Others may speak of it as love, divine mind, divine intelligence, Jehovah, Lord, Father, first cause, as well as a whole host of other synonymous names. But it doesn't really matter what you call it, because the important thing to bear in mind, and anyone of understanding will really admit the fact, is that it is the power that doeth the work. It's not you and I, it's something we work with, but it also works with us. In other words, everything comes from one source, and that source power always flows and works to and through you. And that is you. Stated differently, the image that you have formed can only come to you on the physical plane of your life. In other words, your results. In one way, and that is by law and through faith. Now, the second part of this particular chapter, Bob is going to work with to show just how faith moves this power into action. Keep these two things in mind as we go through it. There are only two words you need to remember as Bob walks you through this. One is order, and the other is movement. Order and movement. And when both of those are functioning together rather than working against one another, we have success. Happiness, health, and wealth, which is your birthright. So let's bring on, to take us through the rest of this particular chapter, my good friend and your good friend, Bob Proctor.
Sylvia Vanderhook with our company, she's a vice president with our company, gave me a bumper sticker here a couple of weeks ago. And it said, "It's too bad ignorance isn't painful." And you know, that's so true. In covering this particular subject, you're hitting on probably one of the most important things that anyone can study, and yet very few people study it in any depth with respect to application in the various areas of their life. John was quoting Warner von Braun, the late Dr. von Braun. He said one time, now keep in mind this was a scientist, he is considered by many as the father of the space program, and he said after years of studying the spectacular mysteries of the cosmos, he was led into a firm belief in the existence of God. And he pointed out that science and religion were not antagonistic. He said, on the contrary, they are sisters. Well, one studies the forces of nature outside of us, the other studies the force within us. John made reference to that. He was talking about the atheist. I heard a cute little story one time where the guy said he always felt sorry for the atheist. He said when they die, they said they're all dressed up and they got nowhere to go. And now, I have seen in my own life and a number of other people's lives some spectacular things take place when a person grasps this idea. Yesterday, I pointed out that one of our great problems was that we thought we were physical beings. And of course we're not. If we were just physical, then there would be a limit to what we could do. There's a limit to what that table can hold. You start piling weight on that table, and you're going to get to a point where the table's just going to crush under the weight. It's like the story of the camel and the straw. You put too much straw on the camel's back, and you get to a point you just put one straw on too many, and that's the straw that breaks the camel's back. We are spiritual beings living in physical bodies. Now, you and I have an intellect, and through the proper use of the intellect, we can do wonderful things in our life. Now, we used a drawing yesterday in the previous lesson, and I'd like to suggest that you come back and focus your attention on this drawing again. Now, remember, we were talking about the mind. We have no difficulty getting an image of a person's body. We see our own every day. We see it reflecting back from the mirror. Every time we look at someone else, we see their body. Well, the problem we have is that we have no image for the mind. Well, of course, in the previous lesson, we gave you one. And we said, let this represent the mind. And then we pointed out to let this represent the body. And we took and we divided this, and we said this actually is the creative, or the start of all creation in our life, this part of our personality. Because as this power flows into us, we can do whatever we choose with it. And of course, we can build a negative concept, or we can build a positive concept. But we have the choice of what we're going to build. Now, ask yourself, if you could have anything you want, and it starts in the form of an image, what would you start imaging? Because that's really the name of the game. It's name it and claim it. Now, this works both on a negative as well as a positive basis. Because as you take this image, you can accept it, you can reject it. As the images come into our mind, we can do anything we want with them. We do not have to get emotionally involved with them. Now, this part is the spiritual side of our personality. This side of us has no ability to reject an idea. It just accepts whatever comes into it, and instantly and automatically moves the body into that vibration. In other words, the image begins to move into form. Now, as we go on in the upcoming lessons, we're going to talk about more how that happens through vibration and through attraction. I want to share something with you, a couple of stories, and then one personal experience. I was in Jackson, Mississippi back in 1977. I had gone into Jackson to do a seminar, and as I was waiting for my bags to come down the chute, this gentleman came over and he shook hands with me and introduced himself. He told me his name was M.C. Duncan, and he was from Oklahoma City. He was the president of Oklahoma Life. And he said, you know, I've been listening to you all week, and I've been watching you all week. And I said, well, that's interesting. Where was I? And he just laughed, and he had been listening to cassettes and watching the videos. And as fate would have it, we were there for different reasons, but we were both going to the same hotel. So we shared a cab, and we went over to the hotel, we checked in at the registration desk, and then we just wandered over in the foyer and sat down and started chatting. Now, you're going to find that everyone that starts to study themselves, they become great readers. They always want to get into good books because they want to find out more about the subject. It's so fascinating. Well, he and I got talking about the various books that we liked. And we had read many of the same books. And I asked him, I said, have you ever read any of Robert Russell's books? And he said, no, he hadn't. Well, I had an entire set of them. I think there were 8 of them. I had them in my briefcase. Now, I had been reading these books, and I'd give them away here and there. And I just picked up a new set prior to leaving town, and I put them in my briefcase. So I took them out, and I gave them to him. And he looked at me a little strange, and he said, well, let me pay you for them. And I said, no. I said, don't pay me for them. I said, you just take them and enjoy them. And, you know, I just smiled, and I said, you know that you can never give anything away. It always comes back. In fact, pressed down and running over. I said, that's the rules. And he laughed and he said, yes, I know. Well, when I got back to Chicago, to my office, I began to get inundated with great material from M.C. Duncan. And the first thing he sent me was this transcript of a minister's sermon that was preached on November the 21st, 1976. Now, I received this on the 3rd of March, 1977, so the sermon was only a couple of months old. It was delivered by a Reverend Norman Neves at the Church of the Servant in Oklahoma City. And M.C. Duncan wrote here, insist upon miracles today. Here he wrote, Bob, first 4 paragraphs, great story about wrong thinking, etc., etc. Best regards, M.C. Duncan. Now, this is a classic. It really is. Keep in mind, this is how a minister is starting the sermon in Oklahoma City. He began by saying, I read a story in the paper the other day that not only caught my attention, but that continued to hold it and hold it the further I read. It was a story of a railway employee somewhere in Kansas who accidentally locked himself into a refrigerator car and then who wasn't able to escape. Perhaps you read the story also and know what I mean when I say it continued to hold my attention. Now, he said apparently this man had banged and banged on the side of the car to attract someone's attention, but apparently also no one heard him. So he finally gave up and resigned himself to his fate. Sometime during the night, as he felt his body becoming numb, he began to scribble some sentences on the wall of the car. Sentences recording some of his last sensations as he moved closer and closer to death. The first sentence said, I'm becoming colder. The second sentence, a little bit further down, said, still colder. Nothing to do but wait. Then it said, I'm slowly freezing to death. Half asleep now, I can hardly write. And then down at the bottom, this sentence which said, these may be my last words, which in fact they were. When the railroad car was opened the following day, they found him dead. But let me tell you something that's really startling about this story. The freezing apparatus on the car had been malfunctioning. It had not been operating properly for several days. And believe it or not, the temperature hadn't gotten below 49 degrees during the entire night that he was there. In other words, this man had become the victim of his own illusion. He had presumed that his time had come and his life was over, when in fact there was no need of that presumption at all. And so, even though the temperature had never fallen below 49 degrees, this man died nevertheless and isn't here to enjoy himself today. Neves went on to point out, he said, there's a lot of us that do that with our lives, aren't there? We misread the signs of our predicaments. We presume that things are worse than they really are, and so like that man, we too become the victim of our own illusion. We die, if you will, even though the temperature of our circumstance never even gets close to freezing. Now, you see, this man used his reasoning factor, and he used it incorrectly. He let what he thought were circumstances control his thinking. That's the image he put in, and that's exactly what he got. Do you think maybe that that's what Moses was talking about when he talked about that reasoning factor? When he said, behold, today I lay before you both a blessing and a curse. Now, I'm going to give you an example of someone that used it the other way. Many years ago, I made a sales call in Chicago when I first started to do seminars in the United States on a gentleman named Mel Haycraft. Mel Haycraft was the vice president of sales to the Prudential Insurance Company in their Mid-America region. Now, I did not know it at the time, but the Prudential Insurance Company was the #1 company in the world, and the Mid-America region was the #1 region in the Prudential Insurance Company out of 10 different regions. So needless to say,
I was talking to a heavyweight when it comes to business. I was only in his office a few minutes, and Mel said, well, Bob, what is it? And I said, Mel, I've got a seminar that'll just get your sales flying. And I'll never forget the smile that had come on his face. And he looked at me, and he pushed his chair back from the desk, and he opened a drawer, and he took a file folder out, and he spun these brochures across the desk. Did you see all those brochures? I said, yeah. He's all those people said the same thing. I said, is that right? I said, well, we're different. We was me at the time. But if you're alone in business, you never refer to me, you see. So at any rate, I said, we are different. See, I had a brochure made up that made it look like we operated on the entire 12th floor of the Hancock Center, I thought. But at any rate, he looked at me and smiled, and he said, how are you different? And I said, we get results. He said, they all said the same thing. Now, I knew that I wasn't making any headway. If you're in sales, you know when you get to a point like that, you either have to dance or hit the exit. And I wasn't about to leave. I had a hard time getting in to see this man. As a matter of fact, an associate of mine had phoned him every Monday for a year. We couldn't get in to see him. One Monday he was sick. Mel phoned him to ask what was wrong. And that's how we broke down his door. But at any rate, I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. You give me 100 of your best people. Don't give me the worst, give me the best. I said, anyone can do something with the worst. Just give me the best. And I said, we will do a seminar. Won't cost you a dime. We'll give you the material, give you the seminar. And I said, let them be the judge of whether this will help them in their sales. He said, you got a deal. So we did that seminar. I ran into a chap in Detroit here just a little while ago, Carl Walker, that was in that group of people. I remember Carl sitting in the back row. I'll never forget Carl. And about halfway through the seminar, he kept getting up and down and up and down and up and down. The guy was getting so excited he couldn't stay in the seminar. He had to go out and sell somebody. But at any rate, that's a true story. Carl's over in Detroit, and Carl, you'll be watching this. You'll remember as well as I do. We laugh about it every time I see him. But at any rate, we passed the test. I found myself in front of 450 of their district insurance agents at the Hillside Holiday Inn in Chicago. When I was talking to them for a very short period of time, I suggested that anyone in that room could go out and write $5 million worth of business. Now, when I mentioned that, you could just feel, wham, the minds go closed. I'd lost the entire group. Now, do you see, what we were doing and what was different, we were introducing this element right here to their sales, to the psyche of their salespeople, to their sales presentation, to their belief system. They had never had that mixed in with their training before. This chap come up to me at the first break. He says, Proctor, he said, did you ever sell insurance? And I said, no, I never have. He said, I didn't think so. I said, why are you saying that? He said, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I said, now hold on a second. I didn't say I didn't know what I was talking about. I just said I've never sold insurance. I said, I don't know any more about insurance than the doorman or the salad chef in here. I said, I'm operating on the premise you already know how to write $5 million worth of business. And he looked at me and he said, well, wait just a minute. He said, you know this company is 100 years old? And I said, yeah, I'd heard that. He said, you know there's 20,000 agents in this company? And I said, yeah, I'd heard that. Well, he said, did you hear that we've never had one write $5 million worth of business? Well, I said, then you can be the first. Yeah. Now, this was around the end of August. He said, you said this year. I said, that's right. He said, the year's over half gone. Well, I said, then it won't take as long to do it. Now, I said, Don, if you can see yourself as a $5 million producer, you heard what Paul Hutsey did with this idea, and you get emotionally involved with that idea, you turn it over, that part of you that's unseen, it's non-physical, but it's in every part of your being, I guarantee you, you'll act differently, and what you attract to you will be quite different. And I said, you'll do it. Now, that's a magazine that that company prints, or printed. That's a picture of the man I was talking to. His name's Don Slovan. And that's a write-up about our conversation. The second week in December, Don Slovan had paid for $5,200,000 worth of business. He closed the year with a little better than $6 million worth of business. And the strange part about this is, when he crossed that imaginary line, there was a whole string of people following him.
See, every person, everywhere in history, that got the image of what they wanted, they burned that image into their mind. They refused to accept circumstances. Every one of them have accomplished what they've imaged. For years, people had tried to run a mile in 4 minutes. I mean, thousands of years. Do you know the early Egyptians used to turn a lion loose and let it chase a person hoping they'd run a mile in 4 minutes? But they couldn't do it. The experts said it couldn't be done. They said our cardiovascular system wasn't proper for it. They said our muscles weren't right. The bone structure wasn't right. But in the spring of 1954, a young guy named Roger Bannister quit believing in the experts, started to believe in Roger Bannister, and he ran a mile in under 4 minutes. Within a month, other people were running a 4-minute mile. We had a young guy in this company down in Louisiana. As a matter of fact, he worked for Paul Otzi. That wrote $5 million in a week, and he previously hadn't written 3 in a year. Now, why am I mentioning these things? Well, I mention them because you could all tell a story like this about yourself.
Just reading on commitment here, it's vitally important that you remain committed to your goal. Understand that if you've got a vision, there's no such thing as an unrealistic vision. Roger Bannister did not believe in the experts. Roger Bannister believed in Roger Bannister, and it's precisely why he broke that 4-minute mile. You can do it. Don't listen to the people that tell you you can't. I want to introduce you to a lady that has a phenomenal vision. Susan Busey. Relate to her and the goals she set.
Do you have a dream for your business?
Oh, yes.
What is it?
Without being a cliche, to be a household name, but to be the best service in the world.
Susan Busey said, the very biggest and the best in the world. Susan Busey started a maid service. They're cleaning homes. And she wasn't satisfied just to work in her own neighborhood and earn a few dollars. She wanted to develop this worldwide. I received a call from Susan just within the past week. Susan is opening in the Orient. She has a contractual arrangement with Japanese business firms, and she's going to be opening her business in the Orient. Susan Busey, like Roger Bannister, did not let people telling them they couldn't do it stop them. Don't let anything stop you. You stay committed to your goal. Keep that dream in your mind, and understand the power within you will execute it if you just hold it there and give it everything you've got.
It was his stick person concept, letting go of the past, which I was quite prepared to do, and I'd never heard anybody say to me, let go of the past in such a way that I did. Take a look at the future with optimism and fight. If you want something bad enough, go for it and get it, and I did.
How many people here have played a yo-yo? Come on. How many have played a yo-yo? Let me see it. Have you ever played a yo-yo? Sure you have. Well, I was wandering down the street in Columbia, South Carolina. Must be 15 years ago. I was working out of Los Angeles. And at noon this day, I didn't feel like eating. I was going a little stir-crazy in the hotel. So I decided to just go for a walk. I was with another chap named Michael Sobel, who's a lawyer of ours out of L.A. And we're wandering down the street. It's a beautiful day. And I saw this little kid playing a yo-yo. Now, do you know it's marvelous the way our mind works? We can relive years in our life in seconds, just like that, a millisecond. Well, when I saw this little guy, I had a great movie just whoom right across the screen of my mind. And I saw myself as a little kid coming running out of Balmy Beach Public School in the East End of Toronto. And I would run up Beach Avenue and down Kingston Road, and I was looking for a specific guy. His name was Ricky McGinnis. And Ricky McGinnis was employed by the Cheerio Yo-Yo Company here in Canada. He was a yo-yo pro. He was a champion. And I'm going to tell you, this guy could play a yo-yo. Now, they dressed these guys up. You see, they gave them a uniform. The uniform consisted of a maroon sleeveless sweater that had red, white, and blue here and a V-neck. That was for V for victory. That came from the Second World War. Some of you weren't around then. In fact, most of you weren't around then. But anyway, that's what that represented. But he had a great big crest here in the center. And it had Cheerio across it, and it had Yo-Yo Champion. Then it had little badges sewn all over it, and each one of these little badges represented a trick. And if you learned the trick, you'd get these little badges. Well, of course, he had them all. And I always remember I envied this guy because he had a great big raft of yo-yo strings around his neck. Now, yo-yo strings, when I was a young guy, were 2 for a nickel. And, of course, if you had 2 nickels at the same time in our neighborhood, you were considered financially independent. I mean, now, it was a poor neighborhood. None of us slept alone in that area until after we got married. I mean, you just fat ones on the bottom, you know. I mean, that was a rough area. Well, at any rate, every now and then we'd break a string, and we didn't have a nickel to buy a new string, and he would take one of these strings out and he'd hand it to us. He might even pat us on the head and call us by name. Well, of course, we had arrived if the pro recognized us. Because, you see, he was like the Pied Piper. When we found him walking up the street, we'd walk with him and we'd just stare at him, you know, and just look at him. I mean, we had this guy. You talk about God. We thought this guy was God. I mean, we had him deified. Well, at any rate, he would get to Kingston Road and Scarborough Road, and he'd start teaching us a trick, and he'd test us on a trick, and we'd form a great big circle around him. Now, that's what I saw in a matter of a millisecond when I saw this kid play the yo-yo. And I suddenly had the strongest urge inside of me to play a yo-yo. I didn't have a yo-yo. So I called this little kid over. I said, come here. He was all by himself, just a little kid. You know, so he come over and I said, give me your yo-yo. So he took his yo-yo off and he gave it to me. Now, he was still at a pump your body stage. You see, he didn't know how to play the yo-yo. He was like Carol. He was just learning. But at any rate, he'd be walking along and he'd pump his body, and I guess if he kept doing that, he figured it would go up and down. So at any rate, the little kid gave me the yo-yo, and I thought, I wonder if I could still play one of these things. I hadn't had one in my hand for years. It's not bad. You can give me a hand for that if you want. Well, then I started to remember some of the tricks. That's called making it sleep. If you can't do that, you are out of luck. You can't play the yo-yo. You can't do the tricks. So did that. Then I remembered this one. This was rock the cradle. You learn how to do that, and you get a badge, you see. Isn't that wonderful?
What trick is that, Bob?
What trick is that? That's a dandy. You know, Gina asked me just a few minutes ago, John, there's a yo-yo in that bag. Do you want to throw it out? Gina asked me a few minutes ago, how's the string on your yo-yo? And I said, oh, it's fine. Now, that's the second time in a week. That's the second time in a week that that's happened. I got to get this one working right. It wasn't working right earlier. Well, yeah, John used to carry the yo-yos and clean the boards, you see. Ah, we got it gone. We're right back in business. Remember that song, John? It's just like old times. He was only a baby. He was a bad baby, too. Now, you don't believe me, ask his mother. She's sitting up there. Well, at any rate, I was in the Boy Scouts. You see, I came prepared. I have 2 yo-yos. I think I have 2. Yeah. That was rock the cradle. Learn how to do that, and you get a badge. Now, we had another one. Well, this is a dilly. And this one called shoot the gun. Now, seeing as how a pro's at his best regardless, I'm going to make this sucker work. But at any rate, one day he came around and he said, listen, we're going to have a big contest, and he said the winner is going to get one of these sweaters. Well, I'm going to tell you, you talk about building an image in your mind. All of a sudden, I could see on the screen of my mind that sweater on me. And you talk about getting emotionally involved. What did we say feeling was? We said feeling is conscious awareness of vibration. What did we say caused vibration? We said getting emotionally involved in the idea put the body into the vibration that it had to be in, and when you become consciously aware of that, you called it a feeling. Well, I could actually feel this sweater on me. I mean, I could hear all the pretty little girls saying, that's the guy that won the sweater. And of course, I'd let on I didn't hear him, and I'd say, that's right, you know, it was me. And anyway, I could actually feel this. I mean, I had to have that sweater. You know, every once in a while, something comes up, and you just have to do it. I had to win that sweater. Now, I was just a little kid. I was learning a phenomenal life's lesson, but I didn't know I was learning it. Now, Rick would come around, and he'd just show us this trick once. He'd fire this thing down, and he'd bring it up. I may have to get another string for this thing. Get up here. You got to do that now. Yeah, that's it. All right. Now, how many of you can do that with the yo-yo? Now ask yourself why you're not able to do that, and I am. Do you want to know why? I'm going to tell you why. See, any person in this room could learn how to do that. If you wanted the sweater bad enough, and I wanted that sweater, and I hooked the sweater up, what I wanted, with what I was doing, and I had to believe I could get it. What did Napoleon Hill say? He says there's a difference between wishing for something and believing you can receive it. And he said the key is you've got to believe it. William James says believe, and your belief will create the fact. Well, you know, that's where it all starts. That's where it all starts. I don't care how simple it is. I don't care if it's just winning a sweater with a yo-yo. It could be writing the 5 million, or it could be doing what that man did in the boxcar. It works both ways. It has no ability to change the idea. Whatever you ask for, that's exactly what you get. Now, as you take the idea that you build, and you've got the ability to sit down and design any idea you want. You see, if you are going to decorate your room, you'd get an idea here in your mind of how you'd like that room decorated. And then you'd go and get the things that you needed, and you'd put them in place until you had built on the physical plane of life a replica of the picture you've got in here. We have a gentleman here with us today that wrote the music and the lyrics for The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. Give Scott Turek a hand. Sitting right over here on the side. Stand up for me, Scott. Scott is the musical director over at Leopoldson Theater. When you heard Dave ask, is there anybody from out of town, and you heard someone say from Colorado, Scott is from Colorado, but he is entertaining over at Leopoldson Theater. If you want to see a good play, you want to go over. I've been to Scott's play in the past, and I'm going to tell you this man is quite a musician. Scott, where does the music start? Would you say it starts right in here? You start hearing it in your head, don't you? Yeah. That's right. You actually hear the music in your head. You see, Scott takes this power and he turns it into music in his head. He literally hears it. And as he hears it, he sees it written on paper. Am I right or wrong? Then you take a pen or a paper and you write it. Scott, stand up for just a second, because this is a good example. Then when he's got the music, he not only writes the music, he put words with the music. Is that correct? And we call those lyrics. And he takes and he writes the lyrics, and he knows those words. What are words? Words are nothing but ideas dressed up for our physical benefit. And you put words, and that puts more meaning then to the sound that you've heard. Is that correct? Thank you, Scott. Now, you see, some people will say, well, he's creative, but I'm not. That's not true. Everyone's creative. We're all an expression of the same power. We've all been given the same tools. Scott has developed those, and many of us haven't. This is where it starts. Now, you're working with a universal power. This power just isn't in you. It's in everyone. It's in everything. We use this drawing to graphically convey an idea of you, your body, your mind, your intellect. But if you were to look at this properly, this is how it would appear. It's a universal power that you're impressing that idea on. Do you know when you throw a pebble into the lake, the entire shoreline has been changed? If you throw a pebble into the Atlantic Ocean, the entire shoreline has been altered. You'll say, oh, not the Atlantic. Yeah, even the Atlantic Ocean. Do you know where our problem is? We could not see with these physical things the change in the shoreline. But understanding lets us see the change in the shoreline. Van Gogh was asked how he did such beautiful work. He did it the same way Scott does it. I dream my painting, and then I paint my dream. Do you know you'll never buy an original painting? Why? The original's on the mind of the artist. Well, we're all working with the same power. Don Slovan sensed that I believed he could write the 5 million. I knew he could write the 5 million. That gave Don a little inspiration, and he started to think about it. He started to think of all the good things that would come to him, fame, fortune, everything. And he got emotionally involved, and as he put that idea in there, Don Slovan moved into a brand new vibration. He started to attract all kinds of different things to him. Do you think it's an accident when one person, one in sales, goes into their office and in their pigeonhole there are no messages, and another one goes in and there's 14 people wanting to buy something from them? Do you think it's an accident when there are two businesses side by side, one wins, one loses? I go to a barber shop down on Bayview Avenue, Tony's. I've been going there for 25 years, whenever I've lived in Toronto. 4 doors away is another barber shop on Bayview Avenue. I have never seen anyone in that barber shop in 25 years. I've never seen one person. Now, I know someone goes in there. I know that because the person couldn't keep the doors open otherwise. Tony's, you always have to wait. And the other one, you would never have to wait. Someone would say, well, that'd probably be a good place to go. I don't think he'd cut it the way I want it cut. And I think there's a lot of people think, I don't think he'll cut it the way I want it cut. But why is it empty? Is it because I'm thinking that? No. It's empty because that's the way that man sees his barbershop. We had some people come into Chicago one time when I was working with the Nightingale organization. They had a chicken restaurant in Ohio. It was out in the country. It was a great, big, beautiful white mansion. They sold more chicken dinners than any restaurant in the United States. People would come from 3 states away to buy from them. It's in the image. Now ask yourself, what kind of an image have you been holding? Have you been wishing good things would happen but think bad things would happen? You see, most people will let their present physical results control their way of thinking. They're emotionally involved in it. They think it's an accident that the same results keep reoccurring. That's no accident. If you've got a financial problem, if you've got a cash flow problem, if you've got a marital problem, that's what most people concentrate on. If a doctor takes a photograph of your body and then tells you you're sick and shows you you're sick, what's the person concentrate on? Sickness. What's the photograph prove? The photograph proves that the person has been concentrating on something wrong to move their body into that vibration. What should they do? They should ask for help. Where does it come from? There's only one source, and they see perfect health. Or they see prosperity. But the cynics don't believe this. And it's a strange thing, the cynics don't get results either. Quit letting your present results control your thinking. This power that I call God is in every one of us. And it's no more present in one person than it is in the other. Scott the Turk hasn't got any more of this power than Bob's got. Bob hasn't got any more of it than Reen's got. Reen hasn't got any more of it than Dave's got. Every one of us are an expression of the same power. And when we really grasp this universal concept, we're going to realize that we are all essentially the same with the same powers. It's learning how to use this. I remembered how that went, Dan. It says, because the time will most assuredly come, and the best and wisest know not how soon, when death, the leveler of all human greatness, will reduce us all to the same level. It's like burning the paper, isn't it? It's like boiling the water. See, death, as we know it, is moving out of this thing. Life, as we know it, is in this thing. But if nothing's created or destroyed, and if all science and all theology tell us the same thing, then that only postulates one theory, the theory of life. See, everything you have is going to belong to someone else at the time of your death, but what you are is yours forever. Now, we want to try and understand this concept. On page 28, we say you are a perfect instrument for spirit to express itself through. Start to see yourself. Now, every time you think of yourself, think of that drawing. Every time you think of the drawing, you think of yourself. You've got to have an image to work with. On page 28, we say, see yourself as a perfectly endowed spiritual instrument without limitation. When you do, you're going to find it easy, in fact natural, to expect the good you desire. You will also understand that doubt simply obstructs the unfoldment of the prosperity in your life. Now, read this bottom paragraph on page 28. Doubt does not shut down the workings of the power. The power's always working. Think of the man in the refrigerator car. It's always working. It never stops. There isn't some emotional or capricious God saying, oh, wait a minute, you're choosing the wrong thought. You ask and you'll receive. You ask for the wrong thing, you're going to get it. It'll be delivered right on schedule. You can make buck on it. The doubt you hold becomes the picture, which will turn into your physical results. You see, when you build the picture, you control from inside. You do not control from outside, regardless of the circumstance of the present results. What did James Allen say? Your circumstances may be uncongenial, but they will not long remain so if you perceive the ideal and strive to reach it. Do you know what an ideal is? An ideal is an idea that you fall in love with. And you know what love is? Love is resonance. It's harmony. It's in tune. It's operating on the same frequency. Well, when you get the higher side of your personality operating with the lower side of your personality, you're going to see miraculous changes take place on the physical side of your personality. But until you get these two in tune, you're going to have a problem. Because when they're not in tune, there's what we call conflict. And if there's conflict in the mind, I guarantee it'll express itself in the body. What do you think dis-ease is? It's the opposite of at ease. On page 29, one of the best definitions of faith I've ever heard came from a chap in Chicago, Clarence Smithison. Clarence Smithison. He said, faith is the ability to see the invisible. What did we say about Scott's music? No one on planet Earth had ever heard that music that he heard in his head until he put it on paper and then sent it out so that the rest of the world could enjoy what he was enjoying. It's the ability to see the invisible, to believe in the incredible. What is incredible is that there's a power in every cell of your being that operates in a totally deductive manner. It will take whatever image you impress it upon it, and it'll move you into the vibration you have to be in, to act the way you have to act, to attract the thing you have to attract for the manifestation of the image that you chose to build. We can say, using a slightly different vocabulary, I'd make the observation, if you can show me a person who achieves great things, I can show you a person who has great faith in themselves and their ability to achieve what they imagine. On page 29, I was having dinner last night with Paul Hutsey. He told me a most interesting little story. Paul was talking about, it's what's on the inside, it's not what's on the outside. He talked about it yesterday, well, he was talking about it last night. And he tells the story about the little black boy that went to the carnival. And there was a man there blowing up balloons, filling them with helium gas, and then letting them go. And he filled a red balloon, and then he tied it up and he let it go. And And the little boy was standing there watching him. And then he filled a yellow balloon with helium, and he tied it and he let it go. Then he filled a green balloon and he tied it and he let it go. And the little boy said, "Mister," he said, "can black balloons fly?" He said, "Son, any balloon can fly. It's not what's on the outside that makes it fly, it's what's on the inside." And that's the way it works. Interesting idea. We say comparatively few people today realize just how much faith in oneself, your higher self, not this false concept that we've been running around with, can't do this, can't do that. Your higher self, that side of you that's universal, that's the same side of us all. That part of you that's spiritually perfect has to do with your achievement. The majority of people never seem to conceive of faith as being a genuine creative force. Yet the truth is that not only is faith a bona fide power, it is the greatest one you will ever encounter. Ever encounter. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that whatever you accomplish in your lifetime will be in direct proportion to the intensity and persistence of your faith. Intensity, what do we mean by that? Well, remember we said one of the intellectual factors was the will. The will gives us the ability to concentrate on an idea. And when we concentrate on the idea, we're just taking that power and turning it right over. We're giving more energy to the idea. What did Emerson say? The only thing that can grow is the thing you give energy to. It's been told to us 10,000 ways. I think what we want to do is wake up. May I borrow your program, please? No, the tapes. You have a set of these tapes. You need a new tape. Some of you will be wondering how to get these out, and you're digging with your fingernails, and the ladies are getting upset because they're breaking their fingernails. You just have to press on the side, and they pop out. And then it tells you underneath how to get them out. Andy Rooney would probably get about an hour and a half out of that. Now, you've got a relaxation and visualization tape. I want to suggest that you put this to good use. On page 30, we're suggesting that you take this new understanding that you're developing. You take the description let on the mind. You let yourself get emotionally involved in this image. And you know that every time you do, in a very relaxed state, wham, you just trigger those brain cells. You just think of the new you, and that picture comes up. And you know every time you do that, you're giving more and more energy to those brain cells. They become stronger and stronger. And in a relatively short period of time, those ideas will be fixed in your mind, and that's the way you'll live. When Cary Grant passed away, I read a page, an obituary on Cary Grant. There was an entire page of one-liners. The last one was by Cary Grant himself. He said, "I acted like Cary Grant for so long I became him." I acted like Cary Grant for so long, I became him. You can say, I've acted like this person on page 26 for so long, I became that person. Now, you can go over this lesson and go over it. You can't go over it too often. Couldn't possibly. We're going to touch now on what you should expect, because you're going to find that expectation is what really makes the difference. Now, as John goes through this page, I want you to think, if I built that picture on page 26, I painted the picture. It's like Scott heard the music, then he painted it on paper. Well, you saw the person and then you painted it on page 26. And every time you get emotionally involved, you rewrite it. And you're going to find you'll crystallize it. And you'll make it better. And you'll make it better. And you'll make it better.
From your Born Rich program and play this tape, what you're going to do is put yourself into a very relaxed state. It'll be an altered state of consciousness. Go and lay down someplace quiet by yourself and turn this cassette on. And when you get into a very relaxed state, throw the switch of that person you want to be. You're going to activate those brain cells. Now, in the beginning, it's going to remain a fantasy. But by playing this tape daily, twice a day if you can, and turning that picture on that you built on page 26, activating those brain cells, that fantasy is going to be turned into a theory in your mind. Now, every time you build that picture in a relaxed state, take page 30 and rewrite the picture. And what you want to do is crystallize the picture of the person you want to be. Cary Grant one time pointed out, I acted like Cary Grant for so long, I became him. That's what's going to happen to you. The power within ultimately will take this image of yours and begin to express it with and through you in your life. But it's vitally important that you use this cassette, put yourself in an altered state of consciousness, a very relaxed state, throw the switch that you created when you wrote out page 26, begin to visualize your fantasy, only it becomes real. When you come back to a normal conscious state, it's very important that you rewrite this picture again. Each time you rewrite it, it'll become clearer and clearer. Now, you may alter it a bit as you rewrite it. And as you rewrite it, you give more energy to those brain cells. Every time you relax, you're moving that picture more and more into a state that we call a theory. And you're going to find that you will be motivated. The power within you will actually take that image and begin to express it with and through you, and your theory will literally become a fact. Mine has, Roger Bannister's did, and so will yours. But it's important that you do what we suggest with page 30. Now, when that's complete, the next part that John Canary is going to lead you into is going to be truly rewarding for you. John's going to suggest that you begin to expect an abundance in your life, in all areas of your life.
Keep this idea in your mind as we run through this abundance lesson here. John is going to lead you through that now. Let's give John a hand as he comes out.
About 6 years ago, I was down in a place called South Jersey, around Cherry Hill, Trenton, Atlantic City. And there was 2 speakers on a program just before me. And I've never been able to understand why I'm always the last one on a program, no matter where we're speaking. As a matter of fact, same thing happens to Robert. But something interesting happened on this program. There were 2 people on it who were stone blind. The first speaker was Tom Sullivan, that you see in the odd TV show, Good Morning America, programs of that nature. And both of them gave the same title to their talk that day. And the title went like this: If only you people could see what we hear. Now that day I learned something about that we don't see with our eyes, but we do see with our mind. In other words, and I'm going to work with both boards here in a little while, but I learned that day that the individual who has a desire can achieve that desire when they understand the relationship of being able to see it with their mind. Now, when Charlie Bosley got up that day, I could not believe what I heard when he was introduced as one of the top 10% of all life insurance agents on this earth but yet the man was stone blind. Now, Charlie Bosley said he has always had a desire to achieve something. But he said he never ever left the house because he was feeling sorry for himself as a result of something that happened to him in Vietnam. Then he said one day he was down in Atlanta watching a great golf tournament with the great Ben Hogan. And Ben Hogan would get up and tee off, and they'd tell Charlie, Ben's getting up to tee off, and he'd yell, come on, Ben, you can do it, you can do it. They'd come over and say, Mr. Bosley, you can't talk like that. At a golf tournament, you have to pretend you're at a funeral. But he said, I went through it for 18 holes because Ben Hogan is my hero. And he said, no one's going to throw a blind man off the golf course. Now, he said, when it was all over, Ben Hogan came up to him and he said, Mr. Bosley, I want to thank you for being such an inspiration to me today. And Bosley said, no, it's I who should be thanking you, Mr. Hogan. He said, you see, when I heard your story, I was a man living in pity. He said, I heard about your car accident and how before the head-on collision you fell in front of your wife to protect her. And then when they got you to the hospital, they said to your wife, Mrs. Hogan, Ben will not live the night. And your wife said, you obviously don't know my husband. Now, he said, the next morning when you proved the experts wrong and you were able to continue with your life, they said, but Mrs. Hogan, Ben is never going to walk again. And she said, you obviously don't know my husband. Now, as months went by, you see, Ben, he started to get his spirit back again. He started becoming consciously aware, I'm in a bed, my body is broken, but I want to play golf again. And they said, Mrs. Hogan, he wants his golf clubs now strung up on the ceiling where he can see them all day long, but he's never going to play golf again. And Mrs. Hogan said, now he said, Mr. Hogan, you have won more golf tournaments and championships since your accident than before. And he said, that's the reason that I started to experience a different relationship with all the things that I have ever desired. And Hogan said, is there anything I can do for you, Mr. Bosley? He said, as a matter of fact, there is. He said, I'm pretty good golfer. Do you know that he can beat many people on a golf course any day of the week, even though he's blind? He said, what can I do for you, Mr. Bosley? He said, I want to play one round of golf with the great Ben Hogan. Anytime you want. He said, there's one condition, Mr. Hogan. I want to play for $1,000 a hole. Now, I want you to keep in mind here, before I finish this story, Bob mentioned how some people put what is called a crown on circumstance. In other words, there are some people that actually get down and they deify this word circumstance. That's what's in control of their life. But yet here was a man whose sensory factor called sight, it was absent, he was blind. And Ben said, there is no way that I'm going to play you for $1,000 a hole. What will people think of me? He said, now just a minute, Mr. Hogan, you asked me for a request, I gave it to you, now you're backing out. Well, he got the best of Ben, and Ben said, I'll tell you what, I've got some people here, they're witness to the fact that I warned you, I'll play you, but I am going to play my best. Charlie said, that's fine. I wouldn't expect you to do anything else, Ben. Ben said, okay, when do you want to play? And Charlie said, 10 o'clock tonight. Now I want you to think about what happened. You see, I want you for just a moment to think about all the things that you actually desire. Think about all the things that you desire. But now let me ask you something. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'll bet 10 being high that your desire for certain things in life, I would bet that they are at a 10. See, I've heard people say, people lack desire. Nobody lacks desire. You see, if you take and define this word desire for just a moment, just define this word desire. It is the effort of an unexpressed possibility within us that is seeking expression through us. The word desire, it comes from the Latin word dea, D-A-S-I-R-E, which means to give birth to. Everybody in here has something rattling around within them that they want to give birth to. Desire is the language of spirit. But it seems the basic difference in people who experience their desire versus people who do not experience their desire, it has something to do with this great principle, the greatest principle an individual can ever learn, which is called expectation. Expectation. Now, if you had to take and write down something that surrounds this central purpose, just for a moment, if I said to everyone in this room, now Bob asked you to write out on a page what you want to become. Now I'm going to suggest to you that everybody in this room, from the top to the back and in the middle, that every one of us have a desire to be more, to do more, and to have more. But how many people actually expect it to happen? You know, there's a great point in history where Moses was leading all these people around a desert. And you know, a lot of people said he was lost. Moses was not lost. He was a man of wisdom. And what he was doing is leading these people around and around in circles until he was able to change the attitude or the consciousness before he went in to this new land. And all the people, they came to him and they said, Moses, we've got a problem. We have no water. What are you going to do? He said, you go and pray to your God for rain. And away they went and back they came. And they come back and they said, Moses, God has forsaken us. He said, what do you mean? He said, we have no rain. Moses said, tell me, where are the ditches? They said, the what? He said, the ditches. If you believed it was going to rain, you would have dug the ditches. You see, you can go around and desire all the things you want to be, all the things you want to do, and all the things you want to have, but until you're able to see yourself on the screen of your mind, you will never, ever experience the desire. Until you're able to see it and then proceed by acting on it, you will never experience the desire. Now, I want to move over to the other board and cover a little idea that is very dear to my heart just before I touch on the book. Now think about this. Everybody in here at one time started out even in search of a better condition, improved quality, you could say, in our life. But for some reason or other, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% of the people actually experience the objective, the goal, the purpose that they started out with. What happens to 80% of the people who start off with this great desire, this great love to achieve something, to become more, to have more, and to do more, to express more and more of themselves? In that marvelous book I just talked about a moment ago, Genevieve B. Rand said this. She said that the purpose of spirit, the very purpose of spirit, is expression. that it is seeking to become more and more over and above what it has already become. What a great thing to understand. It is seeking to become, but it cannot unless we permit it and provide this channel of expression. Unless we give it the channel, there is no expression. So how many people expect what it is they desire? Bob's going to get into this a little more later, but Raymond Hollowell said in his book, we should never desire something we don't expect, and we should never expect something we don't desire. This is the year now, the season, right now, where you see that commercial come on television. And you see a guy standing under a lamppost there, and he's sniffing, and it's raining, and it's cold, and it's dark, and he's getting a cold. And home he goes, and the scene switches, and there he is resting easily in bed because his wife just gave him NyQuil. Now, if you were to go down to any drugstore today and check the shelves for the cold remedies, there won't be too many. But as soon as the commercial hits the market, go down and they'll have an entire aisle dedicated just to the colds, or you could say that is consistent with the commercial. Because the season now has set up this mental ruling state which is called expectation. This is the season we expect to catch a cold. I've had people in the programs, I go up to them and I say something like this. Do you get a couple of colds a year? Yeah. How many have you had this year? One. Have you got one more to come? Yeah, I usually get it about November. Now that is the mental ruling state. Your expectation is a magnet, and it will attract everything of a like nature. Let me give you an example. Brian, would you stand up with Leslie for a moment? Just go ahead and stand up, Brian. But when you met Leslie, did you just say, that's the girl I would like to spend some time with?
That's...
Brian, just tell me.
No question about it.
Leslie, when you looked at Brian, did you say, now there's a guy I want to spend my time with?
Yeah.
Now, I want you to understand something here. The two of them met long before they laid eyes on one another. Now, I know that's going to pop the navel of most people in here. But what you're looking at is the law of expectation. Now, whether Brian was aware of it or not, he was attracting Leslie into his life. Leslie was attracting Brian into his life. Bob said resonance, or love, is the resonance of thought. What you're looking at is love. And what you're looking at is one idea vibrating in two bodies. Vibrating in two bodies. Brian made me promise I'd get him on the program. Okay, Brian, you can sit down. Okay? Now think about it. Where did you get off in search of or in pursuit of what is called your goal? I want you to imagine going down to Maple Leaf Gardens and suddenly the game starts, you drop the puck, you look at each end of the rink and there's no nets. Now the game would be a little confusing. You need nets to play that game. Well, I shouldn't say that with the Leafs, it doesn't matter. But now think about it. I mean, if there were no nets at each end of the rink, the game, there would be a lot of activity, but there would be no purpose in playing the game. How can you play the game of life? How can you get up in the morning, put both feet in the floor, and you've got nothing to work toward? See, you have a desire, but what you do is you don't see yourself in possession of the desire. Consequently, you don't release this power that flows with and through you. But isn't it interesting that we all started out in pursuit of the objective, but something happens at a particular point. We run into a crisis. We run into conflict. And it seems that we run into what is called demands. What are some of the demands we all run into when we start to try and improve the quality of our life? Be a little better as a salesperson. Be a little better as a person, as a mother, as a father. Someone once asked me, give me one good reason, Canary, why I should have a goal and maybe try to be a little bit better than I am. I'm going to give you one. There are little eyes upon you when they're watching night and day. There are little ears that quickly they take in everything you say. There are little hands all eager to do everything you do, and a little boy or girl who's dreaming of the day they'll be just like you. For you're this little person's idol, you're the wisest of the wise, and their little mind about you no suspicions ever rise. For they believe in you devoutly, and me, in all we say and all we do, Those little people who are dreaming of the day they'll be just like you and just like me. What are we like? For we are setting an example every day in all that we do to those little gaffers who are dreaming of the day they'll be just like you. Just like you. And just like me. Well, you see, when you're faced with a demand, don't have enough money, debt, people phoning us, and I'd suggest that anyone who is in debt, I'd strongly urge you to read that chapter on Born Rich. It'll show you how to handle it. It'll show you how to handle it. Now think about this. Why is it when some people are faced with demands that turn into what are called risks, that some take what is called an option? Do you know the mind is such a marvelous, marvelous piece of equipment? Although the mind is an activity, it is not a thing. It is not a thing. I want you to think about this for just a moment. When the mind is presented with a demand or a risk, the mind will offer you and me an option. Do you know the option it offers us when we're faced with a strong demand and a risk is called the escape hatch. We then start expecting the result that we don't want. We are a force of energy, and we attract everything of a like nature. Bob mentioned that this mental state of vibration, which generates this emotional state of vibration, which moves this body into action, those three states of vibration are nothing more but your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. Think of this word, attitude. Attitude is nothing more but our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. That's your state of vibration. That's the energy that you send out into life. And the only thing that flows in your life is based on what flows out of your life. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions release this energy and will attract everything that corresponds to that ruling state. Expectation can be either a blessing or a curse, but either way, it is certainly one of the most powerful unseen forces in your life. What do you expect? I'll tell you how to know what you expect. Take a look at the results in your life. Your results will tell you exactly what you've been expecting. What you've been expecting. Now, worry is the opposite of expectation using the same energy, but worry sets up a magnetic force that attracts things of a like nature or events and people to cause that worried state to actually manifest in one's life. Just quickly, this is a letter from a young boy named David Hulley in Hamilton, Ontario. And the letter he writes is about coming to a program that we were doing out in Hamilton. And he gives me all kinds of pleasantries here, dear John, this, that, and the other thing, and all the great things that happened to him. He said, when I was at your seminar, I wanted to stand up and say, I was a goal setter. I am a goal setter. But he said, I couldn't do that. He said, I allowed the demands and the risks to control what I was going to do. I allowed the demands and risks to keep me in my seat. But he said, then he said, you spent some time with me. We sat down, we talked about it. And he said, you gave me a little better understanding of what I want versus what I expect. There's the result. I want you to take a real close look at this report card, because what's on it, if you go all the way down the page, you will see straight A's. Straight A's. Can you see it, John? He became a goal setter first. Second, he expected the goal to appear in his life. Now, I want to introduce you to Mark Dwyer. Mark, I was standing out in the hallway, and Mark came all the way down the back stairs, and Mark come up and he said, I said, can I help you with something? He said, I just wanted to come down and meet you. You see. So I want to bring up, I had a little talk with him, and I want you to give a warm welcome to Mark Dwyer. Come on up here, Mark. Come over here, Mark. Mark. Stand right there. Now you see, Mark has the same goal that David Hulley has. Isn't it interesting he happened to appear and talk about something I was going to share with you? Now, Mark, which mark is your lowest mark? In what subject?
A D.
A D? In which subject, Mark?
I think it's in science.
Mark, do you like science as much as you like English?
No.
You see, Mark is never going to do as well in science as he's doing in English. Do you know why? He's not really excited about it. How could he possibly expect to do well in it? Now, Mark, I want you to just stand sideways with me here, and I want you to take a look at the board, like just kind of face me. Just turn around and face me. Go ahead like I'm standing, okay? Do that. Now, Mark. Mark, have you been talking to Bob before you come up here? I'm going to get Brian down here to do a little number. Okay, Mark. Mark, you see, here's a person that's not getting any marks in school. They have a desire. And they start out, Mark, with all the marks that they want in school. They want to be good kids. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. They want to do well in school. But you know, there's demands and there are risks. You know what the demands and risks are, Mark? The demands and the risks are coming from their peers. Do you know, Mark, there are people in school that are going to stop you from doing well if you let them.
Yes.
Isn't that right, Mark?
Yes.
Mark, are you going to let them?
No.
Mark, you see, you have a desire, right? Now, Mark, you can see yourself not accomplishing that desire because there's a lot of demands and a lot of things that tell you can't do it. There's a lot of people who are going to say you can't be a member of our club if you want to get good marks. And then what you do is you take the escape hatch. Mark, I want you to remember one thing for me, will you? That no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Will you remember that?
Yes.
No one.
No.
Now, Mark, I want you to back up just a little bit, take a couple steps back, okay? Okay, and stand like I stand, okay? Now, Mark, you do have a desire. Mark has an average of B's in school now. Is that correct, Mark?
Yep.
Mark, what mark do you want, Mark?
A.
Mark wants A's in school. Mark, can you see yourself with a report card with A's on it?
Yes.
Now, Mark, when you go home, I want you to sit down with your mom. Your mom is here, isn't that right?
Yes.
And I want you and your mom to get a blank report card at school. When is the next report card, Mark? When do you get the next one?
I don't know.
Do you get it in the next couple of months, December, something like that?
Yeah.
I want you to get a blank report card when you go home. And you take it home, you and Mom, and you sit down, and what you do is you fill in the marks that you want this year. And then you put it up beside your bed. And you actually see those marks, not only in your mind, but before you go to bed every night, you see the marks that you want already on the report card long before you get the report card. Can you do that, Mark?
Yes.
You can do that?
Yep.
Mark, is there anything you want to say to everybody here?
Hello.
Hello? Mark, I want to thank you for being such a pro, okay? Mark, how about a little hug before you go?
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. Now you see, why can we not sit down with, say, kids in school and fill out the report card before the term begins? We do it in business. We do it in everything else. Why not set up an environment or an atmosphere of expectation? All right. Now, I'm going to ask you that before you leave here today, like at lunch, you take this book with you. You take some time today, and you sit down with page 33, and you list in your personal life, in your family life, and in your business life, all the things that you really want. And then beside it, put down whether or not you have been expecting them. Now, why haven't we been expecting them? Because we allow the demand and we allow the risk to control whether or not we're going to do it. Don't allow others. Don't allow circumstance. Don't allow it to control the way you feel about you. You determine your mental ruling state. Now, would you switch back, please, to page 31? I want to finish this so we can stay on time here. Now, there is one line just below the first paragraph on page 31. What are you doing to increase your income? I could have said, what are you doing to increase your relationships? What are you doing to increase, we'll say, your well-being? What are you doing to increase your productivity? What are you doing to increase these things, to improve them? Well, if your answer to this question is nothing, or if you are just beginning to think seriously about what you could do, you have probably not yet grasped the ideas presented in the previous chapters. You should be aware that the chapters in this book resemble the individual pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And each chapter is related one to the other in such a way that if we put them together, we can see the entire picture. The entire picture. I had an individual come up to me one day at a seminar and said, you know, Canary, said, this is all well and good, and I'd like to go ahead and do it. But he said, you realize that by the time I reach this goal I want to set, he said, I'm 50 now. He said, and for me to reach this goal, I'd be 58. I said, well, how old will you be if you don't reach it? Come on, think about it now. I mean the kind of thinking that we get involved in. Einstein said that all conditions and all circumstances in our lives, he said, they are a result of a certain level of thinking. Now, he said, if we want to change the conditions and the circumstance, we got to change the level of thinking that's responsible for it. We got to change the level of thinking that's responsible for it, which is our expectations must move to a new dimension. In this last paragraph, since you are now well into the heart of the book, I would ask you to pay particular close attention to the ideas which follow, so you can use them to successfully tie all the pieces together. You will soon discover that if the ideas in this chapter are applied with intelligence, that expectation can be a triggering mechanism which attracts into your life every good that you desire. Do you know, if you have something you desire today, which you do you know that puts you in touch with it? You're hooked up to it. You're in harmony with it right now. But it's your expectation that moves it into your life. We will always gravitate towards that which we most secretly love, be it base of beautiful or a mixture of both. For into your hand will be placed the exact result of your ideal, your vision. Into your hand will be placed the exact result of your vision and your ideal. So expectation is the triggering mechanism. However, if you do not exercise extreme caution, expectation can also turn just as rapidly into a destructive, lethal enemy. As people go around expecting bad things to happen to them. Oh, I don't want to do that. What if this happens? Therefore, you must be cognizant of how you are exercising this invisible but powerful force. We believe then that you already understand that you cannot have wealth in your material world until you first visualize the wealth in your mind. Have you ever considered that the highest, the most noble, and the most excellent thing about you is formless in nature? That the highest, the most excellent, the most noble thing about you is formless in nature. But what does this really mean? It means that before any one of us can ever begin to overcome the poverty which surrounds us in our external world, we must first conquer the impoverishment that is buried deep within ourselves. Impoverishment meaning many areas of our life. Some people are emotionally bankrupt. Emotionally. Now what we're going to do is Bob is going to come up and take you through the rest of this chapter. And that will start on page 32. And this will show us exactly how this expectation releases or moves this energy into what is called form. And no one will do that better than Bob Proctor. Thank you.
Flip over to page 32. Now, rather than read that page, I want to suggest that you just listen and mentally go along with me. I'm going to attempt to paint a picture in your mind. I want you to image an elderly couple that are living in the backwoods. They've been there all their life. They know nothing except what's in their own immediate environment. Now, this elderly couple have never had an experience of using electricity. All they've ever illuminated their home with is a wax candle or a kerosene lamp. They've had travelers that drop by periodically that have talked about this idea of electricity, but they have never used it. In the latter years of their life, they're transported into a small town. And to their amazement, this house is lighted with little 8-candled bulbs. Now, keep in mind, all they've ever used is the wax candle or the kerosene lamps. Now, to their amazement, they have this electricity. It would truly be magic to them. Now, I want you to imagine if you've just, I don't know, maybe purchased a microwave oven that has a sensory touch. Just the energy coming from your finger will activate the switch, and it would cook a hot dog faster than you could pour a glass of milk. We stand and we look at those things even when we're using them when we're alone. And we laugh, we think, wow, you know. Meaning, it's not able to talk to us, it's not able to laugh with us, but we're amused by this concept. Well, this couple, I would imagine, would go over and they'd touch the switch. Remember, light to them was fire up to that point. And they're amazed that it doesn't burn them. And they just flip the switch, the light's gone, it's dark again. I would imagine they'd look at this, and go, wow, isn't that something? Think of it. Gee. Try and experience this in your mind. They have never, ever seen anything like this before. They'd do it together, and then when they were alone, they'd wander over and they'd flip that switch again. See, their expectation would be that of fire, and every time they get near light, they expect it to be burned, but now they're finding that this doesn't burn them. It's much better to read by. If they had a book, they could sit and they'd read it so much easier with this new light than they would have with the old. Well, you know, electricity is very, very much like this power that we use in many respects. If you're going to work with electricity, you must work from a higher to a lower potential. Any engineer, any electrician will be quick to tell you that if you attempt to work from a lower to a higher potential, you'll get no use out of the electricity. Certainly no positive use. They'll also tell you that electricity can cook a person's dinner or it can cook the person. And the truth is, we have used it for both on occasion. You can use the electricity to freeze food, or you can use electricity to fry the food. It can be used one way or another. One day, after this elderly couple had become used to this new concept, and they can turn the light on without any fear of being burned, and they're used to these little 8-candle powered bulbs, a traveler knocks on their door. The traveler is holding a light bulb. And he's saying, those little bulbs are no good anymore. There's enough light from them. The illumination, it's limited. What you really need is one of these 60 candle powered bulbs. Those little 8 candle powered bulbs are really next to useless. The elderly couple, of course, doesn't really know what the traveler's talking about. Why, he said, you know that one of these bulbs would illuminate this room to a greater degree than all of these bulbs put together. Said, let me show you. And he goes around and he loosens all the little bulbs but one. Then he takes the one remaining bulb that's burning and he takes it right out of the socket and he puts in the 60 candle powered bulb, and wham, to their amazement, that entire room is illuminated like daylight. They have difficulty believing that so much light could come from one bulb. Now I want you to imagine that traveler attempting to tell that elderly couple that the magic is not in the bulb, that the power had always been there. They'd say, oh, no way, the magic's in the bulb. You go back to the electrician or the engineer, and they'll tell you that the only limits placed on this power that we call electricity that is illuminating this stage, the only limits placed on it are the limits that's placed on the form through which it flows, namely the transformer or the bulb. Likewise, the only limit that's placed on this power are the limits that's placed on the form through which it flows. And if you want to illuminate your life to a greater degree, all that is necessary is for you to build a bigger idea, understand the laws of this power, impregnate this part of your personality with that bigger idea, and you will see your results change just as fast as the light in that room changed. Now, I'm going to give you an excellent example. At the break, I had a gentleman come over and talk to me. He's sitting right over here on my left. And he showed me something. I read you a letter yesterday, or in an earlier lesson, where Joanne White from Kansas City told me about her son going to the seminar in 1976 and the change that took place. That letter was dated February 1986. There's this gentleman sitting on the side here. Do you want to stand up for a minute, please? He came to the seminar in February 1986. What were you earning prior to that, Al?
Approximately $18,000.
$18,000. I'm going to relate that to the little 8-candle powered bulb. Al, approximately what are you earning today per year?
Approximately $500.
$500,000. He didn't even mess around with the 60-candle power bulb. He shot right up to 100. Now, I referred to my son's manager yesterday. This man has the same manager. And I was mentioning that your environment is vitally important. See, not only is Brian fortunate enough to have the same manager, he's fortunate enough to have an associate like Al. There are 20,000 agents selling real estate in Al's company. Is that correct, Al?
That's within RE/MAX International.
There's 20,000.
Correct.
How many of the 20,000, Al, now think of the way I'm asking you the question, of 20,000, how many of them sell more in a year than you do?
About 13.
He stands number 14 out of 20,000 salespeople. Many of these people would be in the business for a number of years. Al's been in the business since February 1986. How many in Canada sell more than you, Al?
7.
Changes daily, I guess. When you handed this to me at the break, and that's when he gave it to me, what did you tell me made the difference?
Just changing my attitude and following some of the things that I've picked up through your seminars.
You came to a seminar shortly after you started.
Exactly.
And he took these ideas, and look what he's done with them. Give him another hand. Thank you, Al. You know, I mentioned early in the book that reading and memorizing this information does absolutely no good. I've been in this business a long, long time. I've been in it just about as long as Brian's been living. And I have watched many people come in and go out of this business. Many of them could talk very intelligently about this, but only a few ever really learned how to use it. You've got to stick with this. And you have to take these lessons serious. They sound a little silly at times, but it's like the little young guy from Burlington that I mentioned, Tim Krochak. He said, although this stuff may sound hokey, it works. You see, Al went from an $18,000 idea to a $500,000 idea. This power doesn't recognize difference. It just takes whatever you give to it and turns it into form.
I was just reading from Belief in the Torchbearer series. You just saw your Mark. He obviously believed what John suggested to him. We received a call here just recently in our office. Mark's last report card, he received 82. 82 in his last report card. Al Spazzeri obviously believed he had a $500,000 idea locked up within him. You see, Mark was always capable of getting the 82, and Al was always capable of earning the $500,000 a year. You're capable of doing what you want. You believe, and you can do it. Is there a better position in your life? Is there a better report card in your life? Believe. You'll get it.
Pass the torch.